Hi guys. Tonight, we settle down near the flickering heart of a Native American encampment. Forget polished granite countertops and humming refrigerators. You're surrounded by firelight and the intoxicating aroma of wood smoke. Sparks dance into the night sky, mirroring the stars above, and every one of your senses is drawn closer, captivated by the scene. This is your kitchen tonight. A kitchen as old as humanity itself. A ring of stones, a bundle of sticks, a few glowing embers, and suddenly, the struggle for survival transforms into the nourishment of life. You lean in, feeling the dry heat on your cheeks, marveling at how anyone could ever have placed such faith in these simple forces to provide for an entire family. You probably wouldn't survive long here without guidance. Not without considerable assistance, at least. But don't worry, expert teachers are present. So, before you get completely comfortable, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy my content. And if you're watching from somewhere far away, please post your location and local time in the comments. I truly appreciate knowing where my viewers are tuning in from. Now, dim the lights and let's begin. The fire itself is more than just warmth, it's the absolute centerpiece of this evening meal. Flames dance around heavy logs, generating an even heat, a far cry from the precisely controlled temperatures you're used to. You watch women carefully laying strips of venison directly onto the low-burning embers. The fat dripping and hissing, creating tiny bursts of orange flame. Children hover nearby, giggling as they're gently shooed away, while elders patiently stir pots suspended from simple wooden tripods. It's a significant historical fact worth noting. Nearly every Native American community, from the Iroquois in the northeast to the Navajo in the southwest, viewed fire as both a sacred gift and an essential tool. The hearth served as both altar and kitchen, a place of both spiritual reverence and daily sustenance. Imagine the smells: a rich, savory blend of meat, roasted corn, and that pungent wood smoke that clings to hair and clothing for days. The crackle of sap pockets bursting inside the burning wood provides a steady rhythm, a natural percussion marking the tempo of their daily lives. Without ovens, they learned to read the flames like an ancient text. Embers for slow, steady heat, flames for quick searing, ashes for gentle roasting. As you crouch lower, you observe how meticulously they arrange the wood, not haphazardly, but with practiced skill and precision. Hardwoods, known for their long burn. On one side, softer branches, for quick, bright sparks. On the other, a fascinating detail that often surprises modern cooks is that ashes weren't simply discarded. They were sometimes used directly in cooking. Dough for bread, for instance, might be placed under a thin layer of cooled ash, baking slowly until a crisp crust formed. It might sound unappealing at first, but it imparted a subtle, earthy flavor that people came to appreciate and even crave. Can you picture reaching into the warm earth and pulling out a loaf kissed by smoke and soot? The fire wasn't merely about filling stomachs, it served as a gathering place. A magnetic circle where stories were shared and songs soared into the night air. Every meal prepared here carried echoes of generations of accumulated knowledge: when to hunt, how to identify safe plants, and the mistakes to avoid. There's an ongoing scholarly debate about the origins of fire's use in cooking. Was it a cultural innovation deliberately passed down through generations? Or did it emerge independently in various locations at roughly the same time? Did each community unlock its secrets through trial and error? Regardless of the exact origins, standing here, you feel the profound miracle inherent in its simplicity. Your hands are dry from the heat, your face warm, but your back still feels the chill of the evening air. You shuffle closer, imagining how absolutely essential this fire must have been during the harsh winter months. The firelight flickers across faces leaning in expectantly as smoke curls upward, carrying not only the aroma of roasting game, but the collective memory of centuries. In the warm glow, you realize that the first kitchen you ever knew wasn't tiled and enclosed, but wide open beneath the stars. With fire at its heart and people bound together by necessity, flavor, and a deep sense of community, you awaken to the quiet scrape of stone against stone, a hollow clink that echoes faintly, like distant bells. In the dim pre-dawn light, You notice that the fire has burned down significantly. But someone is already diligently heating rocks until they glow a faint dull red. This is the moment when stone transforms into a pot. Without metal pans, these resourceful people had to reimagine containers. And their solution is truly ingenious. Water is poured into a hide bag or a wooden trough. And into this makeshift vessel go the hot stones. Hissing like angry serpents. Steam rises. And suddenly, you're boiling food without a kettle. A well-documented historical fact. Archaeologists have unearthed countless cracked and blackened rocks at ancient campsites across North America. Undeniable evidence of this method. Sometimes called boiling stones. They bear silent witness to thousands of years of meals prepared without the benefit of iron cookware. Imagine the patience it must have taken. Carefully moving one heated stone at a time with sticks or antler tongs. Dropping it into the liquid. Then removing it when it cooled. You can almost hear the hiss and taste the subtle mineral tang those stones must have imparted to every broth. You notice the hides used to contain the liquid. Carefully stitched and coated with rendered animal fat to ensure they remained waterproof. The very sight challenges your modern notions of what cookware should be. No pots, no pans, just the ingenious use of what nature readily provided. And here's another interesting detail. Some tribes were known to flavor the stones themselves. They might rub herbs or sap onto the rocks before submerging them in the water. A primitive, yet surprisingly effective, method of infusing additional flavor into the bubbling soup. Picture the crackle of resin meeting boiling water, releasing a woodsy sweetness into the broth. Scholars continue to debate whether this stone boiling technique spread widely through trade and cultural exchange, or if it emerged independently in multiple locations as people everywhere grappled with the same challenge of cooking without metal. The debate continues in academic journals. But you, crouched here in the half-light, simply marvel at the universality of human ingenuity in the face of survival. The food itself might be corn, berries, venison stew, or fish soup, depending on the region and the season. Whatever it is, the boiling process makes it safer and easier to digest. The steam fills your lungs, warming you from the inside even before you take your first bite. Children peer into the steaming hides with wide-eyed anticipation, waiting for the signal to dip their carved wooden spoons. Elders sit patiently, knowing that nothing truly worthwhile comes quickly. There's something deeply calming about the rhythm of it all. Heating, dropping, steaming, scooping, repeating. No timers, no dials, just the attentive listening to the water and the careful observation of the steam. The stones cool, they're reheated, and the cycle continues until the meal is ready. You lean closer, imagining yourself trying it, your clumsy hands fumbling with the hot rocks, the hide sloshing precariously. But here, among these practiced cooks, it looks almost effortless. And when the food is finally ready, bowls are filled, laughter erupts, and steam drifts into the crisp morning air. You realize that this primitive kitchen is far more sophisticated than it initially appears. It doesn't just nourish the body, it cultivates patience, resourcefulness, and a deep sense of community. The fire from the previous night has taken on a new role this morning. And the stones themselves have become silent chefs, coaxing flavor from raw ingredients in a dance as old as time. The fire is burning steadily again. And now you notice another marvel taking shape a few paces away. A group of people are scooping earth with wooden shovels and antler tools. Carving out a wide, shallow pit, they line the bottom with stones and clay. Then build a fire inside until everything is blistering hot. Once the flames die down, food is carefully lowered into the hollow, wrapped in leaves and nestled against the heated rocks. Then covered with soil. This is the clay-lined earth oven. A method that transforms the very ground beneath your feet into a slow cooking chamber. It's widely accepted that earth ovens were used across countless Native American communities. From the arid deserts of the Southwest to the forested Northeast, archaeologists have unearthed dark, charcoal-filled pits with layers of burned stone, providing clear evidence of this centuries-old practice. The evidence isn't subtle. Entire landscapes are dotted with these remnants, often initially mistaken for simple fire scars until closer examination reveals their culinary purpose. Interestingly, Some of these pits were reused again and again in the same location, becoming a kind of ancestral kitchen. Each time the earth was disturbed and the pit rebuilt, it further tied families to their land. A constant reminder that meals weren't just about filling bellies, but about maintaining a deep connection with the land and their kinship. Imagine returning to the same sunken hearth where your grandparents once stood, knowing that the very soil carries the memory of feasts long past. Experts continue to debate whether clay-lined ovens originated as a purely functional solution, or whether they also carried ceremonial significance. Some scholars argue that these pits doubled as ritual spaces, with the act of burying food symbolizing rebirth, patience, or gratitude. Others see them simply as efficient tools perfected over generations through trial and error. The truth likely lies somewhere in between, and perhaps even varied among different tribes. You glance at the pit before you and wonder, were they cooking dinner, or were they also quietly offering prayers? As the pit is prepared, the scent of damp earth mingles with the wood smoke, and you notice bundles of corn, squash, and fish wrapped tightly in husks and leaves. The packages are carefully lowered into the hot stones. Then come the covering layers of clay, dirt, and more leaves, sealing the heat inside. The surface appears almost untouched by human hands. Once the final layer of soil is patted smooth, the waiting begins. Hours pass before the earth oven yields its treasure. But when it does, the reward is extraordinary. Meat that falls effortlessly from the bone, corn that bursts with smoky sweetness, and vegetables infused with a rich, earthy flavor. The method itself possesses a kind of alchemical magic. Heat is trapped, steam circulates, and flavors mingle in ways that an open flame could never achieve. You kneel near the mound, running your hand across the warm dirt, feeling the hidden energy still radiating from below. A part of you marvels at the patience required. There's no rushing this process, no peeking every few minutes. The cooks trust the earth itself to hold and transform the meal. When the mound is finally opened, it feels like unearthing buried treasure. Steam rises in thick, white clouds, carrying with it aromas that make your stomach ache with hunger. The food is lifted out, glistening with juices, the leaves charred at the edges, yet fragrant. A bite of venison, roasted underground for half a day, melts on your tongue with an intensity of flavor that no quick pan frying could ever match. You close your eyes and imagine chewing slowly, savoring the smoke, the soil, and the patience embedded in every mouthful. This earth oven is more than just clever engineering. It's a living metaphor for survival and celebration. It brings people together in the shared work of digging, tending, waiting, and finally, sharing. Children scamper around the mound, eager for the moment of unveiling, while elders smile knowingly, remembering countless similar meals from decades past. The act of uncovering the food becomes a communal event, almost theatrical, as if nature itself had been keeping the feast warm until everyone was ready. What strikes you most is how these techniques transform apparent limitations into abundance. Without pots, ovens, or timers, entire communities thrived. They discovered that the earth could serve as pot, oven, and kiln, all in one. The land provided not only the ingredients, but also the very tools to transform them. It makes you wonder how many solutions to your own modern problems might be lying right beneath your feet, waiting only for imagination to uncover them. Later, as the night deepens and plates are licked clean, the pit is allowed to cool. Tomorrow, it might be rebuilt in the same spot, or abandoned to return to the forest floor. But for tonight, it has served as the center of both nourishment and memory. You sit back, your belly warm, your senses filled, and realize that you've just eaten from the earth itself, literally. The kitchen here has no walls, no roof, no boundaries, only fire, stone, clay, and time. The embers are low now, glowing faintly beneath a scattering of ash, and you watch as someone rakes them into a smooth bed. A hush falls across the camp as ears catch the faint crackle of wood breaking down into pure heat. Then, with a practiced motion, a hand tosses a few husked cobs of corn directly into the ash. There's no pot, no foil wrapping, just kernels sizzling in their leafy armor, the fire itself acting as both stove and seasoning. This is the simplest of meals. Yet in its simplicity lies genius. Archaeological findings confirm that maize was central to the diets of countless Native American communities for centuries. Long before European contact, charred cobs have been found at dig sites dating back thousands of years, silent evidence of corn roasted directly in the ashes. Much like you're seeing now. It wasn't merely food, it was sustenance, identity, and in many tribes, a gift of divine origin. To roast corn like this is to participate in a ritual that connects body and spirit with field and flame. You might be amused to learn that sometimes kernels roasted so fiercely in the embers that they popped, scattering like tiny fireworks into the night. Imagine children chasing after popped corn, giggling as they catch the fluffy white treats. Yes, popcorn existed long before movie theaters and microwaves, born from a campfire's playful heat. That image alone brings a smile to your face in the smoky glow. Some anthropologists maintain that corn roasting was primarily a practical solution for quick meals, while others suggest it carried symbolic meaning tied to ceremonies celebrating harvest and fertility. The academic debate continues because what looks to you like a simple snack might have held far greater significance for the people who first practiced it. Was it merely food, or was it Thanksgiving folded into every bite? The husks themselves add to the magic. Left on, they protect the kernels from burning too quickly while infusing the corn with a grassy sweetness. Peeled back, they serve as natural handles, allowing you to eat directly without plates or cutlery. Your fingers would blacken, your face would glow in the firelight, and your hunger would vanish in a few delicious bites. Close your eyes and imagine that crunch, smoky, juicy, a little charred at the edges, but deeply satisfying. In some camps, women smeared a thin layer of animal fat or bear grease on the cobs before roasting, ensuring the kernels stayed moist and adding extra richness. The smell of sizzling fat hitting hot ash lingers in your mind, savory and irresistible. If salt was available through trade, it was sprinkled sparingly, elevating the corn into something transcendent. Otherwise, herbs gathered nearby provided seasoning, each bite carrying hints of sage, wild onion, or mint. You notice how communal the act is. Corn roasting isn't about solitary chefs laboring behind closed doors, it's about family gathered around flames, waiting for the right moment when the cobs are lifted out and passed hand to hand. The firelight reflects in their eyes as they laugh, tease, and share stories while chewing. Each roasted ear is eaten quickly, but the memory of that gathering lingers far longer. Corn wasn't always eaten whole like this. Of course, you recall the grinding stones from earlier, the cornmeal simmering in hide bags. But roasting in ash was immediate, joyful, and efficient. It required no elaborate setup, no long wait, just a good fire and an empty stomach. For nomadic groups or during travel, it was the perfect way to transform a raw cob into fuel for the body in minutes. There's something about the crackle and hiss of corn roasting that feels eternal, as though this sound has accompanied human existence for as long as flames have. It makes you wonder, in your modern kitchen, how often do you hear your food talking back to you? Every hiss is a whisper, every pop, a cheer, every crackle, a reminder that you're alive, present, and nourished. The ashes themselves, once cooled, are carefully sifted. Any kernels left behind are rescued, nothing is wasted. In lean times, even the husks might be boiled for flavoring, their essence steeped into soups. These details remind you that survival meant honoring every gift from the field. Nothing was trivial, and nothing was thrown away without purpose. Later, when the embers fade and bellies are full, people lie back, the sweet taste of roasted corn still on their tongues. The stars wheel overhead, the fire sighs, and you realize you've just tasted the same food that sustained countless generations through centuries of struggle and joy. Roasted corn on the coals, so simple, so profound, carries within it both survival and celebration. The night has deepened, the stars gleam in their silent watch. And now you turn your gaze toward a wooden frame set near the edge of the camp. Long poles lean against each other in a lattice, forming a rack that hovers just above a smoldering fire. Draped across it are fillets of salmon, their pink flesh glowing faintly in the firelight. The air already heavy with a sweet, Oily fragrance. This is smoking, one of the oldest and most effective techniques for preserving food. And it transforms fish into sustenance that can last for weeks, even months. Archaeological sites along river valleys and coastlines clearly demonstrate that fish smoking wasn't just a luxury, but a lifeline. Layers of charcoal, bone, and wooden structures reveal a history of smokehouses and open racks stretching back thousands of years. You can almost see it, countless generations standing right here, tending fires that burned low and steady, ensuring their families would not go hungry when rivers froze or when journeys stretched long. Curiously enough, the wood chosen for smoking mattered as much as the fish itself. Alder, willow, or applewood were preferred in some regions, each imparting a unique flavor. Families became known for the particular signature smoke of their fish, a detail that sounds like gourmet branding, but was really just practical tradition. Imagine being able to recognize where a piece of salmon came from simply by the faint aroma of the wood that flavored it. There is ongoing debate in academic circles about whether smoking techniques spread across the continent by trade networks or developed independently in regions blessed with abundant fish. Some researchers argue that similarities in rack design and fire tending hint at shared knowledge passed from tribe to tribe. Others insist that necessity breeds parallel invention, that people faced with the same challenge of keeping fish edible naturally discovered similar solutions. Standing here, you realize that whatever the path, the wisdom was universal. The process itself is slow, deliberate, and oddly soothing. Fires are kept small, producing more smoke than flame, and the fish are laid carefully across the racks, angled so that smoke curls evenly around them. You see the oil glisten, dripping in tiny droplets that hiss when they strike the coals. The smell is intoxicating, a blend of sea salt tang, sweet wood, and rich fat that makes your stomach churn with hunger. Yet, no one rushes. This is a ritual of patience, requiring hours, sometimes days, before the fish is properly cured. Children play nearby, accustomed to the scent that will cling to their hair and clothes for weeks. For them, smoke is not an inconvenience, but the perfume of survival. Elders sit close, eyes half shut, as though remembering other fires, other racks, other winters when smoked salmon kept hunger at bay. A story might be told, voices low and steady, so that the rhythm of memory merges with the rhythm of smoke curling upward. One little-known practice was to rub the fish with herbs or salt, when available, before placing it on the racks. This not only flavored the meat, but also helped keep insects away during the long drying process. In coastal communities, seaweed was sometimes used as a protective layer, lending a briny undertone to the final taste. You imagine biting into such fish, smoky, chewy, salty, with a whisper of the ocean still intact. As you watch, the racks become more than just tools, they are symbols of foresight. A way of thinking beyond the immediate meal. Here, food is not consumed as quickly as possible, but carefully preserved so that tomorrow, next week, or next season will not bring despair. Smoking is a conversation between present and future, between hunger now and hunger yet to come. You lean back and consider how, in your world, refrigeration has erased this daily awareness of scarcity. But here, the act of smoking fish is also the act of imagining a cold January night when rivers are locked in ice. It is an act of hope, a promise made by today's labor to tomorrow's survival. The fire continues its gentle sigh, smoke drifting lazily into the star-strewn sky. When the fish are finally ready, they are leathery but rich, holding within them both nourishment and memory. Stored carefully in packs of bark or hide, they will travel far across forests, rivers, and mountains, feeding hunters, traders, and children alike. Each bite is more than just food, it is continuity. Proof that people knew how to bend nature to sustain life. And as the rack creaks in the night breeze with salmon slowly darkening in the smoke, you feel the immense weight of knowledge passed silently through generations. The method remains nearly unchanged because it does not need improvement. Fire, wood, fish, time, that is all. You smile to yourself, realizing that the simplicity of it is what makes it perfect. The fire crackles again, but this time you notice something different. Instead of pits in the earth or racks of fish, A group gathers with slender willow sticks freshly cut from the riverbank. The branches are peeled of bark, sharpened at one end, and soon skewers of meat are threaded along them, rabbit, perhaps, or small birds, even strips of venison. The people settle near the fire and begin to rotate their skewers slowly, patiently, as though the meal were a dance between flame and flesh. It's widely recognized among historians that roasting food on sticks is one of the earliest and most universal cooking techniques. Evidence of charred bones and skewered remains has been found across the Americas, suggesting that long before kettles or pots, people were content to trust a branch and a steady hand. The method endures in every culture today, from campfire hot dogs to shish kebabs. But here, in this circle, you see it in its most essential form. An odd but effective trick sometimes used was to soak the willow sticks in water before threading the meat. The moisture kept the wood from catching fire too quickly and lent a faintly sweet flavor to the food. You can imagine the hiss as juices drip into the coals, a sizzling whisper that makes mouths water all around the fire. Researchers remain divided on whether skewering like this was strictly utilitarian, done when nothing else was available, or whether it carried symbolic resonance. Perhaps in hunting rituals or in teaching children the patience of tending flame. Some argue that the deliberate slowness of turning a skewer was itself a form of discipline, a training in awareness and attentiveness. Others see no deeper meaning, only the practical act of making dinner. Watching now, you suspect it may have been both. The meat cooks unevenly if these hands are not careless. Each skewer, rotated with a practiced rhythm honed by countless repetitions, creates a perfectly crisp exterior while ensuring the interior remains succulent and tender. The aroma is captivating, a smoky, savory fragrance infused with subtle hints of willow. Children, writhing with hunger, plead for a taste even before the meat is fully cooked. Their pleas met with the amused laughter of older siblings who remember a time when they, too, were so impatient. This isn't simply cooking, it's an apprenticeship fueled by appetite. Sometimes, herbs, wild onions, garlic, or sage, are nestled between the chunks of meat before skewering, their oils released as the heat draws them out. This simple preparation yields a layered flavor profile, earthy and fragrant. If fat is available, it's carefully brushed onto the skewers using bunches of grass or feathers, sizzling upon contact and adding a rich, savory coating to the already delicious meat. You lean closer, envisioning that first bite, hot enough to pleasantly sting the tongue, smoky enough to linger on the breath, and juicy enough to warrant a happy, firelight-illuminated finger licking. The skewers themselves become invaluable teaching tools. Younger children are entrusted with roasting smaller morsels, their concentration challenged by the delicate balance required to keep the food above the flames without burning it. Elders watch with amused patience, intervening only when disaster threatens. In this manner, the art of fire tending is seamlessly passed down through generations, not through formal instruction, but through the playful engagement of hunger and the shared experience of cooking. Interestingly, cooking on sticks also significantly enhanced food portability. Hunters could cook their game immediately after a kill, far from the main camp, eliminating the need for elaborate cooking setups. They could roast only what was needed, eat quickly, and move on, leaving behind little more than bones and embers. For nomadic groups, this meant survival wasn't confined to a single location. A fire and a branch could transform any wilderness into a makeshift kitchen. The firelight reflects in every eye as the skewers are lifted, the meat steaming in the cool night air. A hush falls as the first bites are taken, followed by murmurs of satisfaction that ripple through the circle. It's a familiar sound, a universal sigh of contentment that speaks volumes. This is good. This is enough. You share their experience in your imagination, feeling the warmth of the fire and the delicious flavors as if you were there. In this moment, you recognize the remarkable continuity between ancient practices and your own modern experiences. Haven't you, too, leaned over a fire, impatient for your food to cook, laughing with friends as sparks dance in the night sky? This connection spans millennia, linking your hands to theirs across the expanse of time. What you call camping, they called life, and though their stakes were undeniably higher, a matter of true survival. Not leisure. The simple joy of fire-roasted food remains a constant. When the last bones are discarded and the fire dwindles, the scent of roasted meat lingers in your hair and clothing, following you into your dreams. It's a potent reminder that with nothing more than a willow branch and a flame, humanity has always found a way to transform hunger into comfort. The simplicity of this method is humbling, and the imagined taste remains vivid long after the last ember fades. Morning light filters through the trees, casting a soft golden glow over the camp. The fire has been rekindled, and this time, you observe a woman carefully shaping thin sheets of birch bark into a shallow bowl. To your surprise, she fills it with water from the stream, adding dried meat and roots. You anticipate the bark will catch fire. But it doesn't. The water acts as a protective barrier. A man then carefully places glowing stones into the vessel using a carved fork of green wood. And the water begins to bubble, transforming the seemingly fragile birch bark into a surprisingly effective cooking pot. It's widely acknowledged among archaeologists that birch bark vessels were commonplace throughout the northern woodlands, valued not only for their carrying capacity but also for their use in cooking. Their waterproof quality, enhanced with resin or fat, made them surprisingly durable. Indeed, entire sets of these bark containers have been unearthed from burial sites, a testament to their essential role in daily life. Imagine a kitchen stocked not with steel or ceramic, but with the carefully peeled bark of trees, each piece a testament to skilled craftsmanship. A lesser-known practice involved decorating these bark vessels with patterns etched into their surfaces before use. These designs weren't merely decorative, they often indicated the owner's family or carried protective symbols. Picture your stew simmering inside a vessel adorned with markings of deer, rivers, or stars, each symbol a whispered connection to the world beyond the campfire. Some anthropologists posit that bark cooking was primarily a practical solution, a clever adaptation to available resources. Others contend that it held deeper significance, forging a connection between the people and the living trees that provided both sustenance and materials. The academic debate remains unresolved. Was the birch bark pot simply a tool, or was it a partner in the sacred act of nourishment? Sitting cross-legged, listening to the bubbling water, you sense that the answer may depend on who is asked and the context of the question. The stones are added and removed with practiced precision, each one hissing violently as it hits the water, sending fragrant bursts of steam into the air. Bubbles rise from the bottom, transforming the still liquid into a lively stew. The roots soften, the meat loosens, and the herbs release their aromatic oils. Your nostrils flare at the earthy scent, a harmonious blend of wood smoke, sweet birch, and savory broth. Remarkably, simply watching this process sharpens your appetite. Children peer into the pot with wide-eyed wonder, marveling at the tamed power of fire contained within the tree bark. They laugh as the steam fogs their faces, then squeal with delight when an elder drops in another red-hot stone. The hiss and crack of the stones evoke the sharp, dramatic sound of an orchestra's cymbals, a sudden burst of energy in the quiet morning. Each person in the group seems to know their role instinctively. One tends the fire, another cycles the stones, another carefully monitors the pot to prevent it from tipping. Cooking, you realize, is not a solitary act but a communal one. You might find it intriguing to learn that some groups flavored the stones themselves before adding them to the stew. Smeared with pine resin or wrapped in aromatic leaves, the stones infused the broth with a distinct forest-like fragrance. The idea of seasoning through hot rocks seems almost whimsical, yet it was remarkably effective. Imagine sipping a broth delicately laced with pine, wild onion, and smoke, simple yet rich with the essence of place. The birch bark vessel, though temporary, reflects a different philosophy of tools. Modern cookware is designed for longevity, often passed down through generations. These bark bowls, by contrast, were crafted to serve for a season or a journey, eventually returning to the earth. This impermanence didn't diminish their value, instead, it tied them to the cyclical rhythms of growth and renewal. A tree might live on as both shade and stew pot, offering its bark before continuing to thrive. Experts continue to debate whether bark cooking originated in a single region or emerged spontaneously wherever birch trees flourished. The evidence is scattered but compelling. Similar vessels have been discovered from the Great Lakes region to the Canadian North, each adapted to local needs and resources. Standing here, you grasp the elegance of the method in its simplicity. If you have bark, fire, water, and stones, you have a kitchen. The stew is finally ladled out with carved wooden spoons. It's hot enough to require blowing on the surface before taking a sip. The taste is humble. Meat softened to tenderness, roots carrying the flavor of the earth, and herbs brightening the broth. Yet, the birch bark adds an intangible something, a faint sweetness in the steam that elevates the dish beyond mere survival. It feels like a meal born from a direct conversation with the forest itself. When the pot is empty, the bark is likely set aside, perhaps dried for future use or discarded into the fire. Either way, nothing is wasted. The tree continues to grow, and the people continue to eat. You sit back, warming your hands by the embers, realizing that a simple sheet of birch bark has accomplished the impossible. It held fire in its heart without being consumed. And within that fire, people have cooked not only food but also stories, traditions, and hope. The day warms, and laughter rings out through the camp as children chase each other, clutching hollowed gourds. You initially assume they are toys until you notice the adults carefully carving a large pumpkin, scooping out the seeds and fibers. The hollowed shell is then placed directly among glowing coals, filled with a mixture of beans, corn, and strips of venison. A clay lid seals the top. Slowly, the gourd itself transforms into a cooking pot, its skin blackening and softening as the stew inside simmers. It's well documented that many indigenous groups utilized gourds and pumpkins not only as food but also as containers and cooking vessels. Their hard rinds made them excellent substitutes for pottery in communities that moved frequently or had limited access to clay. Travelers and explorers often noted with fascination the pumpkin's dual role, first as a cooking vessel, then as a component of the meal itself. Few modern kitchens can boast such resourcefulness. An unusual practice involved lining the inside of the gourd with leaves before adding the ingredients. This prevented burning and infused the stew with additional aroma. Imagine peeling away the charred pumpkin husks to reveal beans infused with the scent of wild mint or sage. The notion that the cookware itself could enhance the flavor is something your stainless steel pots could never replicate. Some ethnographers suggest that the use of pumpkins and gourds held ceremonial significance. Certain tribes considered them gifts from the earth spirits, symbols of fertility and abundance. Others maintain that practicality was the sole driving force. Pumpkins were plentiful, durable, and naturally suited for cooking. Scholars haven't reached a consensus, but as you watch the gourd bubble gently in the coals, you suspect the truth might encompass both practicality and symbolic meaning. After all, when a tool sustains you and your family, isn't it sacred by default? The cooking process unfolds slowly. The pumpkin skin hardens, creating a natural seal that traps the steam inside. The beans and venison soften. The corn releases its sweetness, and the pumpkin flesh itself melts into the stew. By the time the lid is removed, the interior has transformed into a fragrant blend of earth and fire. Steam curls upward, carrying notes of sweetness and smoke, and you can almost taste the rich, thick broth coating your tongue. Children are given the roasted seeds first, crisped in the fire until nutty and fragrant. They chew happily, cracking the shells between their teeth, while elders ladle portions of stew from the pumpkin's belly. Each spoonful is a delightful surprise: hearty beans, chewy corn, tender meat, and soft, sweet pumpkin. It's a layered dish that feels almost modern in its complexity, though born entirely of ancient improvisation. You might be amused to learn that some pumpkins were roasted whole with honey or maple syrup, creating a dessert that must have tasted like autumn itself, sweet, smoky, and golden. It would have been a rare indulgence in a life often defined by necessity. The fact that such a treat was possible without sugar mills or bakeries highlights the ingenuity embedded in every meal. The pumpkin pot, once emptied, might be tossed into the fire to burn away or cut up so the softened flesh could be consumed completely. Nothing is wasted. The seeds could be saved for planting, ensuring that next year's meals would sprout from this year's vessel. The cycle is complete. Food that feeds you also teaches you how to feed yourself tomorrow. Some researchers remain unsure whether pumpkin cookery originated in a single cultural hub and spread outward, or whether communities across the continent independently discovered its usefulness. Archaeological evidence suggests both may be true, with variations found in widely separated regions. To you, sitting near the coals, it hardly matters. What matters is the ingenuity in recognizing potential where others might see only a vegetable. The sound of the gourd crackling in the embers is oddly soothing. Like a log splitting in a fireplace. You lean closer, watching the stew thicken, and marvel at how this method combines convenience and delicious taste. No separate pot to carry. No cleanup needed. Just a pumpkin, a fire, and imagination. It's a kind of sustainability that modern society often preaches but rarely practices. When the meal is over, the camp feels satisfied in a way that goes beyond mere fullness. Bellies are warm, laughter is easy, and the scent of roasted pumpkin lingers in the air. You rest your chin in your hand, thinking how astonishing it is that survival can be so inventive, so flavorful, so deeply connected to the gifts of the land. A pumpkin is no longer just food, it is kitchen, pot, and dish all at once, a reminder that necessity and creativity walk hand in hand. Later in the day, as the smoke from breakfast dissipates and the camp settles into its rhythm, you hear the steady thunk of wooden pestles striking hollowed logs. A group of women crouch in a circle, rhythmically pounding what appears to be pale brown nuts. You lean closer and realize they are acorns, their shells cracked, their bitter flesh being ground into powder. Initially, you wrinkle your nose. Everyone knows acorns are harsh and tannic, hardly edible. But here, in practiced hands, they are transformed into nourishment. Archaeologists have long noted that acorns were a staple in many Native American communities, particularly in oak-rich regions of California and the East Coast. Charred remains of acorn shells, along with smooth, worn grinding stones, speak to centuries of reliance on what others might dismiss as inedible. In fact, some historians argue that without acorns, entire populations could not have thrived in regions where game was scarce or unpredictable. You might be surprised to learn the meticulous care required in preparing acorns. Once shelled and ground, the meal was leached with water to remove the bitterness of tannins. This was accomplished using ingenious methods, sometimes by placing the meal in woven baskets submerged in running streams. Other times by repeatedly pouring water over the mash in shallow pits lined with leaves. It might take hours, even days, but the patience was rewarded with a mild, nutty flour. Experts still debate whether acorn preparation was primarily driven by necessity, using whatever was abundant, or whether it evolved into a cultural preference over time. Some anthropologists argue that the elaborate process of leaching, grinding, and cooking suggests more than mere desperation. It implies mastery, a skill that transforms hardship into tradition. Perhaps acorns weren't just a fallback food, perhaps they were celebrated in their own right. Once the flour was ready, it could be stirred into mush, baked into flat cakes, or added to soups. Imagine dipping a wooden spoon into a steaming bowl of acorn porridge, its flavor earthy and subtle, filling your belly with warmth on a cold morning. It might not dazzle the tongue, but it would sustain life and strength. And in a world where survival mattered more than indulgence, that was richness enough. There's a peculiar but fascinating detail. Sometimes, ash from the fire was sprinkled into the acorn mash. The alkaline neutralized the bitterness more quickly, a trick both chemical and culinary. To modern ears, adding ashes to food sounds strange, but it reveals an intuitive understanding of chemistry long before such knowledge was codified in books. Children also helped, cracking shells and carrying baskets of water. It wasn't busywork, it was education. Each small hand learned to distinguish good nuts from bad. Each ear absorbed the rhythm of pestles pounding the meal. This wasn't simply food preparation, it was an apprenticeship in survival, passed down without a single lecture. You can almost feel the textures yourself, the rough shell fragments under your fingers, the cool splash of water in the leaching pit, the fine powder of flour clinging to your skin. The camp fills with earthy, woody, smoky smells. As the process continues, the sound of pounding becomes a kind of rhythmic drumbeat, steady and hypnotic, carrying across the forest like the heartbeat of daily life. When the porridge is finally ready, it is served in bark bowls, steaming and plain. Yet, sometimes berries or honey were stirred in, transforming it into a sweet treat. Children's faces light up as the tartness of berries cuts through the blandness, while elders smile knowingly at the indulgence. You realize that even the humblest ingredients can be coaxed into delight with a little creativity. Some communities stored acorns in massive granaries, hollowed logs or woven silos raised off the ground. These caches ensured survival through winter when hunting became difficult and snow covered the land. Imagine looking at a towering store of acorns and knowing your people would not starve, even if storms raged for months. The acorn became more than a nut, it was security, hope, and continuity. There's an elegance in this process that modern eyes often miss. Where you might see a bitter seed, they saw potential. Where you might dismiss drudgery, they saw ritual. Acorn flour wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, dependable, and abundant. And in that steadiness lay freedom, the freedom to endure, to build, to plan beyond tomorrow. As you finish your imagined bowl of porridge, you find yourself oddly comforted. The flavor may not dazzle, but it fills you in a way that fast food never could. It roots you in the patience of rivers, the gift of oaks, and the wisdom of ancestors who refused to waste what the land offered. And as the pestles keep pounding in steady rhythm, you realize the sound is more than noise, it's the heartbeat of survival itself. The camp is lively again, and your attention is drawn to a wide clay pot suspended over a low fire by a tripod of lashed poles. Steam rises from its mouth in fragrant swirls, and as you peer inside, you recognize a medley of corn, beans, and squash, the three sisters, grown together in fields and transformed here into a hearty stew that nourishes both body and spirit. It's a well-established fact in agricultural history that corn, beans, and squash were not only dietary staples but also companion crops. Corn provided stalks for beans to climb, beans enriched the soil with nitrogen, and squash spread across the ground, shading weeds and preserving moisture. This symbiosis was brilliant farming long before modern science gave it a name. Together, they formed a nutritional powerhouse, carbohydrates, protein, and vitamins, that sustained countless Native American communities. A curious detail is that recipes for Three Sisters stew varied dramatically by region and season. In some camps, dried venison or smoked fish was added for protein. In others, wild herbs, nuts, or peppers gave the dish its unique local flavor. It wasn't a fixed recipe so much as a flexible canvas, changing with whatever the land offered. Imagine tasting the same stew in two different villages and finding one smoky and savory, the other bright with herbs and spices, each a reflection of its people and place. Anthropologists continue to debate whether the Three Sisters were primarily valued for their agricultural efficiency or their symbolic importance. Some suggest that the harmony of these plants made them metaphors for cooperation and balance within the community. Others insist that the symbolism came later, born of necessity first and meaning second. Watching the pot bubble before you, you sense that both are true. It was nourishment for the stomach and a lesson for the soul. The stew thickens as the beans soften, the corn swells, and the squash melts into golden threads. The smell is rich and layered, sweet corn mingling with earthy beans and the faint caramel scent of roasting squash. You lean closer, steam fogging your face, your stomach growling in anticipation. A ladle carved from bone stirs slowly, the cook humming softly under her breath, as though the dish itself requires music to finish. Children run by, tugging at the adults, begging for a taste. They are handed wooden spoons dipped into the pot, and their faces light up at the first mouthful. It's filling, warming, and familiar, a dish that likely marked the turning of seasons, the success of harvests, the reassurance that hunger would not win this year. You might be intrigued to know that in some ceremonies, the Three Sisters stew was offered to guests or spirits first before being eaten by the community. Food here wasn't only fuel, It was relationship. Eating together meant more than sharing calories. It was weaving bonds of trust and reciprocity. The pot was big, the portions generous, and no one was left out. The clay vessel itself plays a role in the taste. Slightly porous, it allows steam to escape slowly, concentrating the flavors. Clay pots were often fired in open flames, hardened just enough to withstand daily cooking, yet still fragile by modern standards. To carry one required care, to use one demanded skill. Imagine cradling a pot like this across rocky terrain, every step reminding you that your family's next meal literally rested in your arms. Debates among scholars focus on whether such stews were everyday fare or reserved for gatherings. Some evidence suggests they were staples eaten often in simpler forms. Other sources hint that elaborate versions brimming with multiple ingredients were saved for feasts or ritual events. The line blurs as survival and celebration were rarely far apart in daily life. As bowls are filled, the sound of spoons tapping echoes through the camp. You take your imagined seat among them, holding a warm wooden bowl, the stew steaming against the cool evening air. The first bite is thick and hearty, the flavors blending into something greater than their parts. You taste the sweetness of corn, the creaminess of beans, the softness of squash, and you feel not just fed but welcomed. The Three Sisters stew embodies more than survival, it embodies wisdom. It reminds you that cooperation yields abundance, that diversity creates strength, and that patience rewards those who tend both soil and relationships. With each spoonful, you are not just eating, you are learning. As night descends and the pot is scraped clean, laughter fills the air, the fire burns low, and you lean back with the warmth of the stew in your belly, realizing that this dish has been keeping people alive, united, and hopeful for centuries. Its lessons are as enduring as its flavor. And for a moment, you feel part of that unbroken chain. The night is cool again, and the fire is rebuilt with fresh logs. This time, you see a group kneeling over small lumps of dough, their hands dusted with flour ground earlier from maize and acorns. They pat the dough into thick discs and wrap each one carefully in damp leaves before burying them beneath a layer of warm clay. The mounds look like tiny earthen hills dotting the campfire's edge. Slowly, the ground itself begins to bake the loaves. Archaeological evidence shows that clay-sealed bread was common in regions where pottery was scarce or too fragile for everyday use. The technique left behind layers of hardened earth and traces of carbonized dough, little fossils of meals that fed families centuries ago. It's a reminder that bread, so often considered a European staple, had its own native forms long before colonists arrived with their ovens. You might be surprised to learn that the clay casing wasn't discarded once the bread was cooked. Sometimes it cracked off in satisfying shards, and the inner surface carried a charred aroma that further flavored the bread. Children would even lick the clay shells for traces of sweetness or smoke, treating them like candy wrappers of earth. The image is almost comical, yet it powerfully illustrates the lack of waste in this ancient process. Historians debate whether this clay-baked bread served as daily sustenance or was reserved for special occasions. Some argue its practicality, perfect for travelers carrying pre-formed clay bundles ready for baking on demand. Others emphasize the ritualistic aspects, the burying and unearthing, linking it to communal or even spiritual gatherings. Observing the meticulous wrapping and sealing of the loaves, one senses that both interpretations might hold merit. As the loaves bake, the fire's heat permeates the clay, transforming raw dough into golden brown, steaming bread. The aroma is subtle yet deeply comforting, a blend of the maize's sweetness, the earthiness of the clay, and a faint smoky tang. Hours pass before the mounds are opened, revealing bread moist within, yet boasting a satisfyingly crusty exterior. Fragrant clouds of steam billow forth, whetting appetites in anticipation. The texture, when you finally imagine breaking a piece, is surprising. It's dense, hearty, with a slight grittiness, yet imbued with warmth and satisfying substance. Each bite is redolent with the essence of maize, enhanced by the leaf wrapper's subtle hints of fresh green. It's not the light, fluffy bread of modern bakeries, but it provides a sustaining, hearty energy, in a life demanding constant energy for hunting, gathering, and travel. This bread is more than sufficient. Some loaves are enjoyed plain. Others are dipped in stews or spread with rendered animal fat. The combination is rich, savory, and deeply fulfilling. Children chew noisily, their cheeks rounded with satisfaction, while elders nod approvingly at the familiar flavors. The bread acts as a unifying element, transforming simple soups into celebratory feasts, and hunger into comfort and contentment. Oral histories recount an unusual detail. People sometimes carved symbols, patterns of rivers, suns, or animals, into the clay shells before baking. These decorations vanished when the clay cracked, but for the bakers, they served as small blessings or personal reminders. The act of bread making transcended mere sustenance. It became a quiet form of artistic expression. Imagine the scene. The ground dotted with steaming mounds, smoke curling into the night sky, laughter echoing as the loaves are broken open and shared. The earth itself serves as oven, pan, and lid, a kitchen without walls. Modern baking, with its polished steel and precise thermostats, may have achieved greater precision, but it may have lost some of this intimate connection with the earth and fire. Scholars continue to debate whether the origins of clay-baked bread stemmed solely from necessity or also from a symbolic understanding of the earth as a nurturing provider. The answer may remain elusive, but kneeling here, bread warm in your hands, one senses the truth resides in the experience itself. The act of burying the food, waiting, and then unearthing it mirrors the cycles of planting and harvest, of death and renewal. The loaves are consumed quickly, their warmth combating the night's chill. As crumbs fall to the ground, even birds and small animals partake, picking at the leftovers. Nothing is wasted, nothing is forgotten. When the last piece is gone and the fire dwindles, a profound respect for this simple, ancient bread remains. It is not simply food, it's a dialogue with the land. A reminder that sustenance can spring from soil, smoke, and patience. The firelight flickers across the clearing. But tonight, the cooking preparation is different. The pit being dug is wider and deeper than those used for bread. And more people are involved. They line the hollow with stones, heating them until they glow, then begin layering bundles of meat wrapped in hides and leaves. The sheer size suggests the meat is not a rabbit or fish, but rather deer, or perhaps even bison, cut into large slabs. The entire community has gathered, their voices a vibrant hum of excitement. This is no ordinary meal. This is a feast born of the earth itself. Archaeological studies have unearthed immense roasting pits, some so large as to suggest whole animals were cooked at once. Layers of charred bone and ash tell the stories of gatherings that must have fed dozens, if not hundreds of people. It's a powerful reminder that native cooking wasn't always about small meals around individual fires. Sometimes it was about collective effort and abundance. Moments where survival yielded to celebration. Interestingly, some pits were lined with aromatic plants before the meat was placed inside. Sage, juniper, or pine needles were spread like a fragrant carpet, subtly seasoning the food as it cooked slowly beneath the earth. Imagine opening a pit after hours of anticipation and encountering meat infused with the essence of the forest itself. The aroma alone would be a reward for the patience involved. Scholars debate whether these massive pit feasts were reserved for special occasions, harvest festivals, treaty gatherings, or spiritual ceremonies, or if they were simply the most efficient method for cooking large game. Some argue that the considerable effort required, from digging and heating to burying, points to ritual significance. Others believe that when hunters brought down a large animal, these pits provided the most efficient way to cook it for the entire camp. Both viewpoints hold weight, and standing here, you see how easily the practical can blend with the sacred when food and community intertwine. The process is deliberate and painstaking. First, the stones must be heated until they are white hot, a task requiring hours of continuous burning. Then, the carefully wrapped meat, layered in hides and leaves, is lowered into the pit. More stones are added on top, followed by soil, until the mound resembles nothing more than a freshly turned patch of earth. The trapped heat will slowly roast the contents throughout the night. Families gather nearby, singing or telling stories, their anticipation growing with each passing hour. When the mound is finally opened, Steam billows out like the earth's own breath. The scent is overwhelming. Rich meat, herbs, and smoke mingling into a fragrance so potent it brings tears to your eyes. People gather close, their hunger palpable, yet a sense of reverence also pervades the atmosphere. This is food shared by many hands, and it is treated with gratitude and respect. The meat is carved and portioned carefully. Each piece is tender, juices running down fingers as it's passed from person to person. Children's eyes widen as they bite into chunks that nearly melt in their mouths. Elders close their eyes, savoring the richness. For a moment, silence descends upon the community, united by the simple, primal act of eating together. A fascinating, lesser-known detail is that bones from these feasts were sometimes arranged deliberately afterward, either buried in patterns or left in piles as markers. Some researchers believe this was a way of honoring the animal's spirit, ensuring a balance between what was taken and what was given back. It suggests that every aspect of the process, from hunt to feast to disposal, carried meaning far beyond the physical act of eating. You can feel the heat of the pit long after the food has been removed, radiating into the night air. It becomes a gathering place even after the meal is finished, with children warming their hands and adults discussing plans for the next hunt or the coming winter. The pit itself, once filled with food, now holds conversations, laughter, and memories. Experts continue to debate whether these grand cooking methods influenced neighboring tribes through trade and migration. Similar pits have been found across vast distances, from the Pacific coast to the Great Plains, leading some to suggest widespread cultural exchange. Others argue that the technique, using earth and stone to trap heat, was so logical that it could have arisen independently in many places. Regardless, the persistence of this method proves its effectiveness and enduring appeal. As the night deepens, you sit back, your belly full, your body warm, listening to the low hum of voices around you. The stars arch overhead, steady and timeless, while the pit still smolders faintly. Its duty fulfilled, you realize you have witnessed not just a meal, but a ceremony of togetherness, where food served as both sustenance and celebration. In that warmth, you understand that survival was never merely about eating quickly to stay alive. It was about feasting, remembering, giving thanks, and weaving individuals into a whole. The earth pit was more than a tool. It was a stage upon which community itself was cooked into being. The morning mist hangs over the wetlands, and the swish of paddles in shallow water fills your ears. Canoes glide through tall reeds, their passengers bending to harvest stalks heavy with dark grains. They are gathering wild rice, the food of lakes and rivers, a grain that appears delicate yet possesses the power to sustain entire villages through harsh winters. Each stroke of the paddle rustles the reeds, releasing seeds that fall into the water, ensuring the cycle continues for future harvests. The water teems with life, birds swooping overhead, fish darting below, and the laughter of children balancing precariously at the canoe's edge. Archaeological finds around the Great Lakes region confirm that wild rice harvesting has deep roots, stretching back thousands of years. Charred seeds, canoe fragments, and woven storage mats reveal the central role this aquatic grain played in daily survival. For some tribes, wild rice was more than just food, it was an integral part of their identity, woven into origin stories and ceremonies. The name given to the plant in several native languages translates as the good berry, or the food that grows on water, reflecting its importance. A charming, little-known practice during the harvest was to sing to the rice. Harvesters sometimes hummed or chanted softly as they bent the stalks over the canoe, gently tapping them with sticks to release the grains. The songs served as both rhythm and blessing, a way of harmonizing their work with the plant's spirit. You can almost hear those melodies now, soft voices drifting across the misty water as grains rain down like gentle applause. Some scholars suggest that wild rice was deliberately cultivated, with careful attention paid to water levels and seasonal cycles, while others argue it remained largely a gift of nature, gathered rather than farmed. The debate continues, but either way, what you witness here is a partnership with the environment, neither domination nor passivity, but a balanced coexistence. Once collected, the rice requires further processing before it can be eaten. The grains are spread out on mats to dry in the sun. Their green husks turning brittle. Then comes parching. The rice is roasted over a fire in clay pots or, later, iron kettles, a process that loosens the husks while deepening the flavor. The aroma is nutty, earthy, and intoxicating, curling upward in wisps of fragrant smoke. You close your eyes and imagine standing by the fire. The sound of grains popping softly, as if applauding their own transformation. Next, the rice is threshed. People step into pits lined with hide or bark, their moccasin-clad feet gently trampling the parched grains to loosen the hulls. Children laugh as they watch, perhaps even joining in, transforming work into play. Finally, the rice is tossed into the air in birch bark trays, the wind carrying away the light husks while the heavier kernels fall back. Clean and ready. The motion is hypnotic, a dance of grain and wind that feels almost ceremonial. When cooked, wild rice expands and unfurls into tender, chewy strands, its flavor deep and earthy. A pot of it simmers now over the fire, the aroma mingling with smoke and lake breeze. It's served with fish caught that morning or stirred into stews thick with venison and root vegetables. Each spoonful tastes of water and land, of patience and gratitude. It's a food that nourishes not just the stomach but also the spirit. A delightful detail is that wild rice feasts often concluded with music and games. After the meal, when bellies were full, drums emerged, and the community danced to celebrate the bounty. The harvest was not only about calories, it was about joy, connection, and continuity, food and festival intertwined, transforming eating into an act of thanksgiving. Researchers still debate whether such gatherings were primarily practical, designed to coordinate large-scale harvests, or whether they served as social glue, binding different clans together through shared labor and shared meals. Watching the canoes glide across the water and the fires glowing on shore, you see that people fed not only their bodies but also their relationships, alliances, and memories. You lift your imagined bowl of steaming rice, chew slowly, and feel the chewiness between your teeth, the earthy depth grounding you like roots in the soil. Around you, children laugh, elders smile, and the lake reflects the sky in silver ripples. The grain that grew on water has become food, story, and song all at once. And in this simple, rich meal, you sense the heart of a culture that knew how to live with the land, rather than against it. As evening falls, the fires die down. The rice stores are tucked safely into bark containers, and the canoes are drawn up onto shore. The lake lies quiet again, its gift accepted with gratitude. You rest in the fading light, warmed by food and story, realizing that wild rice is not just sustenance, it is relationship, renewal, and resilience. The glow of dawn filters through the trees, and the camp awakens with a sweetness unlike anything you've encountered before. Thin wooden troughs are lined along a row of fires, and in each one, a pale, watery liquid slowly thickens under steady heat. The air itself seems sticky, filled with the scent of caramelizing sugar. You follow the trail to its source, sap dripping from freshly cut notches in maple trees, collected overnight in bark containers, and now boiled into syrup. This is no ordinary breakfast, this is a transformation of tree blood into liquid gold. Archaeological evidence and oral histories confirm that maple sap was utilized long before the arrival of Europeans. The earliest records by colonists describe native families tapping trees with sharpened bone or stone tools, inserting wooden spouts to guide the sap into containers. For generations, the process was as natural as harvesting corn or hunting deer, a seasonal ritual marking the transition from winter to spring. Interestingly, not all sap was boiled into syrup. Sometimes it was consumed directly as a refreshing drink, sweet and watery, like nature's energy tonic. Children especially enjoyed sipping it cold from bark cups, their mouths sticky afterward. Imagine the surprise of tasting something so delicate after months of eating mostly dried meat and stored nuts. It must have felt like drinking sunshine. Scholars continue to debate whether syrup making began as an accident. Perhaps someone inadvertently left sap too close to a fire, or whether it was a deliberate innovation. Some argue that such precise control over heat and timing suggests extensive experimentation. Others claim it was a stroke of luck that became tradition. Either way, the knowledge spread widely, becoming a cherished seasonal event. The boiling process is mesmerizing. Sap begins thin and clear, but as water evaporates, it thickens and darkens, shifting from pale gold to rich amber. You watch as steam curls into the sky, carrying a fragrance that makes your mouth water. The cooks stir constantly with wooden paddles, careful not to scorch the precious liquid. Every drop represents hours of work. 40 buckets of sap might yield only a single bucket of syrup. Patience is essential, and patience, here, is a practiced art. Once thick enough, the syrup is poured into smaller containers, sometimes gourds or clay pots, where it cools into sticky sweetness. In colder regions, the sap might even be left to freeze, the water rising to the top as ice while the concentrated sugar sinks below. Cleverly, they used winter's own hand to refine their syrup. You might smile at the thought that maple sugar, boiled further until crystallized, was one of the few concentrated sweets available before trade brought cane sugar. These cakes of hardened sugar were portable, easy to store, and treasured. Children would nibble on them like candy, while adults saved them for ceremonies or to sweeten special dishes. Imagine tasting a stew thickened with a drizzle of syrup or roasted squash glazed in maple sweetness. Even dried meats could be coated, transforming survival food into something bordering on indulgence. The versatility made maple not just a luxury but a cornerstone of flavor, transforming the harsh monotony of winter diets into something hopeful and delicious. Some anthropologists highlight the communal aspect of sugaring season. Families and neighboring groups often worked together, tapping dozens of trees and tending multiple fires. The camps became festive, filled with laughter, music, and anticipation. Syrup making was not only about calories, it was about celebrating renewal, marking the end of cold scarcity and the beginning of abundance. There's a lesser-known detail. Some tribes told stories about a time when sap flowed thick like syrup straight from the tree. According to legend, people grew lazy, drinking it constantly until the creator thinned it to watery sap, forcing them to work for their sweetness. The tale wasn't just myth, it was a reminder that effort is what gives value to reward. You sit cross-legged, holding a small wooden cup of syrup between your palms. It's warm, sticky, and almost glowing in the firelight. A taste on your tongue floods your senses, rich, deep, sweet, yet earthy, like drinking the forest itself. It's impossible not to smile. After long nights of smoky stews and roasted meats, this sweetness feels almost miraculous. Experts remain intrigued by how widespread maple tapping became. Was it shared through trade routes stretching across woodlands? Or did different groups discover it independently? The evidence remains debated, but the persistence of the practice suggests its significance was undeniable. Wherever maples grew, people found ways to coax their hidden treasure into nourishment. As the fires die down and the last batches are poured, children dart around with sticky fingers, laughing. Adults sip slowly, savoring. The forest is quiet again, but the air still carries that faint caramel note, like a promise that spring has arrived. You lick your lips and realize that even without modern kitchens, they discovered something extraordinary, a sweetness that could brighten even the darkest winters. The fires burn steadily this evening, and you notice two heavy grinding stones set side by side near the edge of the camp. One is broad and flat, pitted from years of use. The other fits neatly in the palm of a woman's hand. She presses the smaller stone against the larger and begins moving it back and forth in slow, deliberate strokes. The sound is rhythmic, a gentle scrape like waves against the shore. Grain by grain, yellow maize kernels are crushed into fine flour. You lean closer, realizing you're witnessing one of the most vital acts of daily survival. Archaeologists have uncovered countless pairs of grinding stones used to grind maize in villages across the Americas. The wear marks tell stories of years, even generations, of use. Some stones were so worn they formed deep hollows, evidence of thousands of meals prepared on the same surface. It's widely recognized that grinding maize wasn't just a chore, it was the heartbeat of daily life, as essential as fire itself. An odd but telling detail is how these grinding stones sometimes traveled with families when they moved. Despite their weight, Imagine carrying a massive slab of rock across miles of wilderness because it had become inseparable from your cooking. It wasn't only a tool, it was memory and continuity, linking past meals to future ones. Experts continue to discuss whether grinding was considered laborious drudgery or whether it was understood as a communal, even meditative act. Some accounts describe women singing while they ground maize, their voices rising and falling with the scrape of stone, transforming monotony into music. Others suggest that the work was simply endured, a necessity that consumed hours each day. Watching now, you sense both the exhaustion in the repetitive motion and the grace in the rhythm, like a prayer carried on stone. The flour itself is versatile. Once ground, it can be mixed with water to form dough for flatbreads, boiled into porridge, or combined with beans and vegetables in stews. Tonight, you see a woman mixing fresh flour with water in a shallow clay bowl, forming patties. She lays them carefully on a flat stone warmed by the fire. Soon, the aroma of toasting maize fills the air, nutty, rich, faintly sweet. The smell makes your stomach tighten with hunger even before the first patty is turned. Children hover nearby, waiting impatiently. They know the taste well: hot, smoky cakes, crisp at the edges and soft inside. Their faces glow in the firelight as they tear into the first pieces, blowing on them quickly before taking eager bites. You can almost hear the crunch, feel the warmth on your tongue. The simple satisfaction of maize transformed by fire and stone. A fascinating, little-known trick was to mix ash into the maize dough, a practice that released more nutrients by changing its chemistry. Modern science calls it nixtamalization. But for these cooks, it was intuitive knowledge passed down through trial and observation. The result was not only better flavor but also stronger bodies. Proof that survival rested on wisdom as much as on effort. The grinding stones themselves were more than utensils, they were heirlooms. Some were passed down through generations, their surfaces carrying the marks of countless hands. Imagine touching the same stone your grandmother touched, pressing into it with the same rhythm, feeding your children as she once fed hers. The act connects you across time, binding family and memory into every grain. Anthropologists sometimes debate whether maize spread more quickly because of its farming potential or because of its adaptability in the kitchen. After all, a crop is only as useful as the meals it can produce. Standing here, you realize the answer is both. Corn wasn't just a plant, it was a canvas, endlessly adaptable, ready to be porridge, bread, stew, or cake. The sound of grinding continues into the night, steady and patient. It becomes the background music of the camp, the scrape of survival, the rhythm of sustenance. You lean back, your hands dusted in imaginary flour, and feel the comfort of knowing that with nothing more than stone, fire, and patience, a kernel can become a meal. When the last cakes are shared and the flour stored in bark containers, the stones are set aside, ready for tomorrow. Their surfaces gleam faintly in the firelight, worn smooth by centuries of care. And you realize that while pots may crack, fires may die, and people may pass, these stones endure, carrying the weight of tradition across ages. The camp is quiet under the sun and you notice strips of meat draped over long wooden racks. They hang like ribbons in the breeze, darkening slowly under its touch. The fire beneath them smolders, giving off more smoke than flame. This is no ordinary roasting, it is preservation. The meat will become jerky, lean and tough, but capable of lasting months without spoiling. In a world without iceboxes or refrigerators, this practice was not a luxury, it was survival. Archaeological evidence across plains, deserts, and forests shows clear proof of this technique. Scattered bones, drying racks reconstructed from post holes, and even desiccated meat scraps preserved in caves tell us that sun-drying and smoking were essential lifelines. Hunters returning with a buffalo or deer knew they had more than one night's feast. They had days of labor to ensure the animal's gift endured. Without preservation, abundance one day could mean famine the next. One curious but ingenious method involved mixing the dried meat with rendered fat and berries, pounding it all together into a dense paste called pemmican. It was calorie-rich, portable, and astonishingly durable, capable of lasting for years if stored properly. Picture biting into a bar of pemmican, Its texture is heavy and greasy. Its flavor a peculiar blend of meat and sweetness. It might not appeal to a modern palate, but in the harsh winter months, it was the difference between life and death. The question of whether jerky and pemmican were independently developed by various groups or disseminated through extensive trade and cultural exchange remains a subject of ongoing debate among anthropologists. Some researchers contend that the striking similarities across diverse geographical regions strongly suggest a shared body of knowledge, a common culinary heritage passed down through generations. Others maintain that the sheer necessity of preserving meat would have inevitably led disparate populations to independently discover the efficacy of drying as a preservation method. The debate is far from settled, a testament to the complexity of tracing ancient cultural practices. However, the very existence of these preserved meats serves as compelling evidence of remarkable human ingenuity, a testament to our ability to adapt and thrive in challenging environments. The process itself demands considerable patience. Strips of meat are meticulously sliced thin, ensuring that air and sunlight can penetrate every surface, maximizing exposure for efficient drying. These strips are carefully arranged to prevent contact with dirt or insects. The use of smoke further deters insects and adds a distinctive flavor. The air becomes thick with a sharp, smoky, slightly metallic scent, a unique perfume that permeates the entire camp. A tangible aroma of survival, of resourcefulness and perseverance. The sight of so much meat hanging, drying in the sun is both reassuring and sobering. It represents food security, a tangible buffer against hunger. But it also starkly highlights the magnitude of the hunt, the effort and cooperation required to secure such a bounty. Children are strictly cautioned against prematurely consuming the drying meat. Despite the intense temptation, elders emphasize that hasty consumption before the meat is fully dried risks illness, jeopardizing the very food security it provides. Thus, waiting becomes an integral part of the process, a lesson in discipline and patience, a vital component of both culinary success and cultural transmission. The lessons imparted extend beyond mere culinary skills, encompassing the values of patience, delayed gratification, and respect for tradition. A frequently overlooked aspect of dried meat consumption is that it wasn't always eaten plain. Often, it was rehydrated in hot water, restoring a semblance of its original texture, or crumbled into stews to add a rich protein boost and enhance the overall flavor profile. Through such innovative techniques, a single deer could provide sustenance for numerous meals, each transformed and enriched by the skillful application of fire, water, and culinary imagination. One can easily envision hunters on arduous journeys, carrying bundles of jerky secured in animal hides, slowly chewing on the dried meat as they traversed vast distances. Each strip provided the strength needed to continue their journey, to climb steep ridges, and weather harsh storms. The food was lightweight, easily portable, incredibly dependable, and served as a reliable companion, a source of sustenance and resilience. Even today, the act of savoring a store-bought piece of jerky subtly connects us to that long lineage of travelers who relied on this method for survival and sustenance. Beyond its practical applications, the preservation of meat also served a crucial social function. Large game kills necessitated community cooperation, fostering a sense of shared responsibility and collective achievement. The tasks involved, cutting, slicing, hanging, tending fires, required the coordinated effort of several individuals, making jerky production a communal endeavor. The collective nature of jerky making reinforced the essential principle of communal survival, underscoring the interconnectedness of the group and the interdependence of its members. Observing the meat racks swaying gently in the breeze, one sees more than simply food, one witnesses the tangible embodiment of teamwork, transformed into sustenance and communal solidarity. As evening descends, the meat strips harden, taking on a dark, rich hue. Some are ready for storage, carefully packed into containers fashioned from bark or wrapped in animal hides to safeguard them against moisture. The sight of these carefully prepared bundles provides immense comfort, each one a concrete promise that hunger will not prevail when winter's harsh grip tightens its hold. The community relaxes, laughter returns, their future secured by the day's collaborative efforts and resourcefulness. Closing your eyes, one can almost taste it, dry, chewy, smoky, stubbornly resisting the teeth, yet gradually releasing its concentrated energy and sustaining power. It's not a glamorous food, but its unassuming nature provides a steadfast sense of comfort, bridging the gap between the abundance of today and the potential scarcity of tomorrow. Jerky represents concentrated memory, a tangible link connecting the present's bounty with the uncertainties of the future. When the final racks are inspected, and the embers of the fires begin to die down, a peaceful calm settles over the camp. The remaining meat gently sways in the evening breeze, softly whispering promises of endurance. The simplicity of the food stands in stark contrast to the depth of the wisdom underlying its preparation. A powerful testament to human ingenuity in transforming a fleeting moment of success in the hunt into a lasting legacy of sustenance. The fire burns steadily, its glow now drawing the eye not to the racks of drying meat but to the rounded shapes of clay pots nestled among the embers. Their surfaces are darkened with soot, their bellies radiating a faint warmth from the heat within. Here, one witnesses cooking not as an improvised act but as a carefully honed craft. A testament to the evolution of human ingenuity and culinary skill. Pottery has entered the scene. And with it, the range of culinary possibilities expands dramatically, exceeding anything previously imagined. Archaeologists have unearthed countless fragments of clay vessels scattered throughout ancient village sites. Some adorned with intricate designs, others showcasing a utilitarian simplicity. These artifacts date back thousands of years, irrefutably proving that long before European contact, indigenous communities had already mastered the art of transforming earth into durable, functional cookware. The invention and widespread adoption of pottery are widely recognized as a pivotal turning point in food preparation, storage, and communal sharing. A particularly intriguing detail is that some pots were intentionally tempered with crushed shells or sand incorporated into the clay mixture. This innovative technique enhanced the pot's resistance to cracking under high heat, significantly increasing their resilience. While the texture might appear somewhat crude to contemporary eyes, the underlying technique reflects a sophisticated understanding of material properties and their manipulation. Imagine kneeling by the fire, placing a pot you have personally shaped and crafted onto the coals, aware that it carries not only the contents of a meal, but also the enduring memory of the hands that molded, dried, and fired it, a legacy of skill and tradition. Researchers continue to debate whether pottery originated in a single cultural center and then spread outward or whether it emerged independently in multiple regions across the globe. Some evidence, like the recurrence of similar stylistic elements across vast distances, points towards trade and migration as potential catalysts for the widespread adoption of pottery. Others posit that the universal need for more efficient cooking methods would have naturally led different communities to independently discover the same fundamental principles, inventing pottery through a process of independent innovation. The truth, much like the pottery itself, likely incorporates elements from many different narratives, a multifaceted history reflected in the diversity of pottery forms and techniques. The pot simmering over the fire tonight contains a hearty stew of fish, beans, and wild greens. The clay's thermal properties ensure even heat distribution, allowing the flavors to blend more deeply than any roasting method could achieve. The gentle bubbling sound, a low murmur reminiscent of the earth itself, accompanies the fragrant steam rising in curling tendrils. The aroma is a captivating blend of smoky fire, sweet beans, and the briny tang of fish. Leaning closer, eyes watering from the smoke, the stomach tightens with a growing sense of anticipation and hunger. Children play nearby, their laughter punctuating the rhythmic simmering of the stew, a counterpoint to the quiet intensity of preparation. Occasionally, a child dashes forward to peer into the pot, only to be gently shooed away with a smile. The community waits patiently together, a shared experience built around the knowledge that meals prepared in this manner are meant to be savored communally, not hoarded or consumed in isolation. The anticipation is palpable, the single pot acting as a powerful symbol, binding dozens of individuals into a shared circle of patient expectation. Clay pots revolutionized the preparation of foods suitable for the elderly and children. Soups, porridges, and herbal teas became readily available. This development was not merely a matter of convenience, it represented compassion woven into technological advancement. A gently simmering pot could transform tough grains into digestible porridge, or roots into medicinal concoctions, ensuring that no member of the community would be excluded due to limitations in their teeth or digestive systems. A captivating detail is that some pots featured designs that seemingly represented water, clouds, or plants, symbolically connecting the vessel to the very ingredients it contained. Food did not simply fill the pot, it fulfilled the symbolic narratives etched onto its surface. To eat from such a pot was to acknowledge one's place within a larger, interconnected narrative, a story that intertwined the river, the field, and the sky within a single, humble stew. The pot is finally lifted from the coals using long sticks, its surface emitting a faint hiss as it cools. Ladles crafted from bone or wood skillfully scoop out portions into smaller bowls, ensuring equitable distribution. Each person receives a share, steaming and fragrant. An imagined sip reveals the warmth enveloping the throat, the delicate fish, sharp greens, and creamy beans creating a symphony of flavors. It's more than flavor, it's comfort. A sensory experience born from the harmonious interplay of earth and fire. Some anthropologists argue that pottery fundamentally altered social structures, enabling the storage of food surpluses and facilitating more elaborate feasts. Others maintain that it was simply another incremental step in the ongoing human tradition of adapting tools to meet evolving needs. Regardless of the specific interpretation, the clay pot before us stands as undeniable proof that innovation doesn't require loud pronouncements or flamboyant displays. Sometimes, it's as quiet and unassuming as a pot resting in the embers, transforming simple ingredients into a nourishing meal that sustains both body and community. As the bowls empty and the pot cools, reflection upon the journey thus far reveals a path marked by both progress and continuity. From the improvisational use of bark and stone to the durability of fired earth, each step represents advancement, yet also a deep respect for tradition, with methods and techniques remaining alive in collective memory and ongoing practice. The clay pot crackles faintly as it cools, as if sighing with relief after its labor. It's more than an object, it's an ancestor, a vessel shaped by human hands to carry the gift of fire into the future. The air is cool and damp, carrying the faint perfume of herbs crushed beneath bare feet. Near the fire, women and men gather bundles of wild onions, garlic, and sage, carefully collected earlier in the day. Their arms are laden with green stalks and pungent bulbs, and soon the sharp, spicy fragrance fills the air as they begin chopping the plants on flat stones. The familiar smells of stews and smoked meats are now enriched by a new, distinctive aroma, a flavor crafted not from imported spices, but from the wild heart of the land itself. Archaeological evidence, including traces of charred onion bulbs, mint leaves, and other wild plants, confirms that the seasoning of food was not a mere accident. Indigenous cooks possessed a profound knowledge of edible herbs and roots, skillfully incorporating them into their dishes for both flavor enhancement and medicinal benefits. These meals were never bland, they possessed the tang of wild garlic, the sharp bite of onion, and the sweetness of mint. Each plant was chosen with meticulous care and informed by centuries of accumulated knowledge and experience. Wild onions, for instance, were sometimes enjoyed raw as a campfire snack, their pungency causing eyes to water and mouths to burn. Children would dare one another to chew them straight from the ground, squealing with delight at the sharp bite. Yet, when added to a simmering stew, this initial harshness mellowed into a pleasant sweetness, a testament to how even the fiercest flavors could be tamed through patience and the skillful application of heat. Scholars remain divided on whether these plants were gathered primarily for their culinary properties or their medicinal uses. Garlic and onions, after all, possess antibacterial properties, and sage was frequently employed in cleansing rituals. Was the practice of seasoning food purely a matter of taste preference? Or did it also serve as a form of disguised medicine? The boundaries blur, and as fragrant steam rises from the pot, The answer might well be both. The herbs are tossed into clay pots, simmering alongside maize and venison. The broth immediately brightens, the sharp herbal aroma cutting through the richness of the meat. Steam curls upwards, and one can imagine the first sip, savory, earthy, subtly sweet, carrying the freshness of green fields even in the dead of winter. This isn't mere survival food, it's cuisine shaped by a deep knowledge of plants and the rhythms of the seasons. Sometimes, roots such as cattail or sweet flag were also added, their subtle flavors enhancing the soups and contributing to overall nutritional value. At other times, dried berries were sprinkled in, offering a surprising burst of sweetness. These combinations were not haphazard, they were meticulously crafted based on accumulated experience. A deep understanding of which plants grew where, which leaves were safe to consume, and which roots would turn bitter if cooked for too long. Every mouthful was both a meal and a lesson, a tangible connection to the land and its bounty. An often overlooked aspect of seasoning is its communal nature. Families shared herbs with their neighbors, particularly during winter when fresh greens were scarce. A pot of stew might carry the flavors of not just one gatherer's knowledge, but of many hands pooling their resources. The resulting taste, then, was not only of plants but also of generosity, of community spirit and shared sustenance. Crouching closer to the pot, one watches as the herbs soften, their oils shimmering on the surface. A woman dips a carved ladle, lifts a spoonful to her lips, and nods in satisfaction. She begins serving the stew into bowls, and the first taste provides immediate warmth. The sweetness of onions, the earthiness of sage, and the mellowed garlic combine to create a flavor that is not just satisfying, but deeply restorative. The body responds, not just fed, but fortified, strengthened by the inherent power of the ingredients and their preparation. Researchers debate whether flavor was considered indulgence or necessity. Some argue that herbs were crucial for making otherwise monotonous diets more palatable. Others believe that they carried deeper cultural meanings, each plant symbolizing connections to spirits, seasons, or ancestors. Either way, the importance of flavor is undeniable. The land was not just a pantry, it was a pharmacy, a spice rack, and a teacher all at once. As bowls are passed around, children initially wrinkle their noses at the pungent steam, only to smile after tasting the softened sweetness. Elders murmur their approval, recalling how the same herbs once grew abundantly near their childhood homes. Laughter and memory further enhance the flavor of the meal until the pot is scraped clean. Leaning back, the fire crackling warmly, the belly warmed by this imagined stew, a profound realization dawns. Survival was never simply about filling the stomach. It was about crafting food that delighted, healed, and connected people to the land and to one another. Flavor, in all its pungent, bitter, sweet, and fragrant forms, was the bridge between necessity and joy. The fire burns low, casting shadows across the herb bundles drying nearby. Tomorrow, they will be used again, incorporated into meat, scattered over broths, or steeped into teas. Tonight, however, their work is done. Drowsy and full, the understanding comes that even in a world without salt shakers or spice markets, meals were far from bland. They were symphonies of the forest, composed leaf by leaf, root by root, a testament to human ingenuity and culinary resourcefulness. The evening grows still, and the rhythmic clatter of tools, almost musical in their regularity, fills the air. A group of men and women work over hides stretched across wooden frames, scraping them with sharpened pieces of bone and antler. Initially, it appears that they are tanning hides for clothing, but a closer look reveals that some of these tools are destined for the kitchen. Bones and antlers are being shaped into pounders, mallets, and spatulas, implements that will aid in transforming raw ingredients into palatable meals. In the absence of metal, bone becomes a versatile combination of chef's knife, mortar, and whisk. Archaeological digs unearth an astonishing variety of these bone and antler tools: scrapers for cutting fat, chisels for splitting nuts, pestles for pounding grain. Many are polished smooth from years of use, their surfaces bearing the marks of countless meals, silent witnesses to generations of culinary endeavors. Such tools are widely recognized not as temporary improvisations, but as carefully crafted instruments as essential to daily life as the fire itself. They extended human hands, providing sharper edges, stronger pounding power, and finer control over food preparation. A curious detail is the preferential use of certain bones for specific tasks. Elk antlers, dense and strong, became preferred pounding tools for maize. Bird bones, hollow and lightweight, were fashioned into delicate straws for sipping broths or for gently blowing on embers to stoke fires. Even fish bones found a second life as needles for sewing bark or hide containers. Nothing was wasted. The hunt provided not only meat but also the very utensils used to prepare it. Some anthropologists argue that the crafting of bone cooking tools held symbolic meaning, transforming the remains of animals into implements that ensured their spirits continued to nourish the community. Others contend that it was simply a matter of pragmatism, the most efficient way to utilize every available resource. The debate persists, but as the firelight glints off polished antler, it is difficult to deny the sense of reverence implicit in the hands shaping these essential tools. The tools are soon put to use. A woman kneels with a heavy antler pestle, pounding roasted maize into coarse flour on a stone slab. Each strike sends a dull thud through the ground, a rhythmic heartbeat of labor. Another uses a bone scraper to slice fat from venison, dropping the white pieces into a clay pot to render into cooking oil. The smell of sizzling fat, rich and savory, fills the air, causing a tightening of the stomach in anticipation. It's worth noting that some of these bone scrapers also served as eating utensils. Children gnawed meat directly from bones, then kept the cleaned remains as makeshift spoons or spreaders. A rib bone, polished smooth, could stir soup, spread mashed berries, or even serve as a serving spatula. Imagine holding one warm from the pot, noting how perfectly its curve fits the hand, as if designed by nature itself. The sounds of bone tools at work create a unique rhythm: pounding, scraping, cracking, a distinctive soundtrack blending with the crackling fire and the murmur of voices, becoming the background music of camp life. To outsiders, it might sound crude, but to those present, it is the daily symphony of survival. Each sound signaling progress: fat rendered, maize ground, meat sliced, stew stirred. Scholars point out that bone and antler tools also reveal insights into social organization. Their creation demanded skill, patience, and a deep understanding of animal anatomy. Teaching younger generations to craft and use these tools was not only a practical necessity but also a cultural imperative, embedding values of respect for animals and responsible resource management. A broken scraper wasn't discarded as trash, it was reshaped into a smaller tool, or perhaps even an ornament. Even fragments retain some utility. When the meal is finally ready, the results of this meticulous labor shine through. Maize flour, mixed with rendered fat, becomes cakes roasted on flat stones. Venison, carefully trimmed with scrapers, simmers gently in broth, seasoned with herbs pounded fine by bone pestles. The flavors, smoky, savory, earthy, are born from the silent labor of bones transformed into tools, into extensions of human hands, into culinary companions. A fascinating detail is that, in some regions, antler pounders were decorated with carvings of animals or intricate patterns. These weren't just tools, they were miniature works of art, linking daily cooking with storytelling. To pound maize with a pestle carved in the shape of a deer was to remember the hunt, the gift, and the cycle of life. Every meal became layered with memory and meaning, transcending simple sustenance to encompass cultural heritage and spiritual connection. Sitting back, chewing on an imagined piece of maize cake, the tools nearby glisten faintly in the firelight, ordinary, yet extraordinary. Without them, cooking would be harder, slower, less precise. With them, survival becomes art. While modern kitchens boast stainless steel knives and electrically powered mixers, here survival was sustained by ingenuity. The transformation of bone into blade, antler into hammer, fish spine into needle. The tools may seem simple, but the knowledge behind them is profound, woven into every bite. As night deepens, the tools are cleaned and stored, carefully placed beside the fire for tomorrow's use. They are not disposable, They are partners. Extensions of human hands. Essential components of the ongoing cycle of survival. Closing your eyes. The steady thud of pestles and the scrape of scrapers echo in the mind. A lullaby of bone and fire that carried countless generations through hunger into fullness. A testament to human resilience and resourcefulness. The waves crash gently against the shoreline, their rhythmic sound accompanying the salty tang of sea air mingling with the woodsy scent rising from driftwood fires. Far from forests and cornfields, food here comes from the tides. Families gather at low tide, baskets in hand, prying clams and mussels from rocks slick with seaweed. Soon, heaps of shellfish accumulate beside the fire, gleaming wet in the moonlight. A coastal feast unfolds. Unlike anything witnessed inland, archaeological sites along the Atlantic and Pacific coasts are littered with massive shell middens. Piles of discarded clam and oyster shells that rise like artificial hills. These remnants, some thousands of years old, bear witness to generations of seafood feasts. It's widely accepted that these shell mounds were far more than simple garbage heaps. They were historical archives of diets, social gatherings, and seasonal rhythms. They prove that shellfish were not occasional snacks but the central pillars of coastal survival. A fundamental source of sustenance for coastal communities. Intriguingly, some shell middens grew so large that later villages were built directly on top of them. Imagine homes and fires resting on the bones of countless meals. The very ground serving as a monument to centuries of culinary traditions. What modern city can boast that its foundations are literally the shells of its suppers? Experts continue to debate whether large-scale clam bakes were purely practical, a means of efficiently cooking numerous shellfish at once, or whether they carried ceremonial significance. The effort involved, gathering, heating rocks, and layering seaweed, suggests more than mere convenience. Some anthropologists believe these feasts reinforced community bonds, marking seasonal abundance and expressing gratitude to the ocean for its bounty. Observing the scene, one senses a blend of hunger and reverence mingling in the smoky air. The cooking method is remarkably ingenious. A pit is dug into the sand, lined with stones heated in the fire until they glow red hot. Layers of seaweed are laid on top, followed by clams, mussels, crabs, and sometimes even fish. More seaweed is piled over, creating a steam trap. The mound hisses as seawater trapped in the plants sizzles against the hot rocks, releasing a briny vapor that smells distinctly of the sea. The pit is covered with sand. And then comes the waiting. As hours pass, the beach transforms. Children chase gulls, elders share stories, and the ocean provides a steady, rhythmic percussion to the background. When the pit is finally uncovered, a fragrant cloud of steam erupts, thick with the scent of brine and smoke. The shellfish gape open, their flesh glistening, infused with the taste of seaweed and fire. The first bite is a revelation, salty, tender, smoky, a perfect blend of ocean and earth. Imagine slurping a clam straight from its shell, the juices dripping down your chin. The flavor is primal, direct, needing no enhancement or refinement. It's as if the sea itself has prepared its own dish. A lesser-known practice was the sun-drying of leftover shellfish meat, preserving it for future consumption. These dried morsels could be crumbled into stews or consumed on long journeys, providing portable tastes of the ocean. In this way, a single clam bake could offer not only an immediate feast but also food security for days to come. The shell middens themselves tell their own stories. Some layers are darkened with ash, indicating fires burned directly on top, while others show evidence of sorting, suggesting that certain shells were reserved for tools or ornaments. Even in disposal, nothing was wasted. Shells became scrapers, beads, and even temper for pottery. The feast echoed long after the last clam was eaten. Anthropologists point out that such gatherings were about more than just food, they were about identity. To eat from the sea together was to affirm one's belonging to a specific place and community. The ocean was not simply a pantry, it was a relative. Its gifts acknowledged with gratitude and ritual. Sitting cross-legged on the sand, watching the sun sink below the horizon, a warm clamshell in hand. Laughter carries on the wind, mingling with the crash of waves. The fire glows. Gulls circle, and the mound of steaming shellfish steadily diminishes as hungry hands reach in. By the end, the feast leaves behind only empty shells, stacked in piles that will one day form new middens. Standing on this scene, one realizes that history is being written in calcium and ash, layer upon layer of meals that sustained lives. What is tasted is not only food, but continuity, the enduring bond between the ocean and human hunger. As the tide creeps back in, smoothing the sand, the fire dies down to embers. The people drift away, their bellies full, voices soft with contentment. Holding the shell in your palm, you marvel at how the sea itself served as kitchen, table, and feast all in one. The fire is alive again. But this time, a pot set low among the embers catches your eye. Its surface glistens with something thick and golden, and a strong, savory aroma rises, rich and heavy, unlike the sharp smoke of dried meat or the sweetness of maple. Someone is stirring slowly with a wooden paddle, watching as fat melts from chunks of animal tissue. This is rendering, the slow art of coaxing oil and grease from flesh and bone. Without frying pans or butter churns, rendered fat was an essential cooking medium, as vital as fire itself. Archaeologists examining ancient sites often find stones and pottery darkened with greasy residues, evidence that fat played a central role in indigenous cooking practices. It is widely accepted that no part of an animal was wasted. The hunted animal was not wasted. The fat, though easily overlooked, was among the most prized possessions. In a world where calories dictated survival, fat wasn't a luxury, but an essential resource, a vital form of insurance against starvation. A striking detail often noted by researchers is the practice of cracking marrow bones directly over the fire, then scooping out the rich, buttery marrow with sticks or fingers. Children, in particular, relished this delicacy, treating it as a kind of sweet treat. Imagine the exquisite sensation of warm, buttery marrow melting on your tongue on a frigid winter night, pure comfort. A balm against the harsh realities of their existence. The debate continues among researchers as to whether rendering fat was primarily for preservation, coating jerky to ensure edibility, or equally for enhancing flavor. Some archaeological evidence suggests that the rich taste was just as valued as its practical applications. Watching the fat bubble and shimmer, you suspect both motivations were equally true, nourishment and delight intertwined. The clarified rendered fat, once cooled, was stored in small bark or clay containers, forming pale cakes. These cakes were later used to fry strips of meat, enrich soups, or add richness to mixtures of berries and nuts, resulting in food that was not only sustaining but deeply satisfying. Picture dipping a piece of roasted bread into hot grease, the crust absorbing the flavor until every bite drips with decadent richness. Sometimes, rendered fat was mixed with ground seeds or dried grains to create compact, easily portable rations, providing long-lasting energy crucial for hunting expeditions or migrations. You can almost feel the weight of such food, dense and oily, settling in your stomach like a promise of strength for the miles ahead. An unusual, yet ingenious, technique involved using rendered fat as a cooking surface itself. Flat stones were coated in grease before dough or meat was placed on them, preventing sticking and creating a wonderfully crisp, sizzling crust. The very sound, meat snapping and hissing against the hot stone, would have been enough to whet the appetite of anyone within earshot of the camp. The utility of rendered fat extended far beyond its culinary applications. It served as medicine, salve, and fuel for lamps. The same grease used to fry venison could soothe chapped skin or illuminate a long winter night. This remarkable versatility meant it was treated with utmost reverence, carefully collected and meticulously stored. Nothing so precious was ever allowed to be wasted. Dripping uselessly into the flames. Leaning closer, you're enveloped by the smoky, heavy, mouthwatering aroma. It's the scent of abundance. A rare treat in a world where hunger was a constant companion. The bubbling pot seems almost alive. Each pop of grease is a reminder of the animal's gift, transformed into sustenance and warmth. Some anthropologists argue that the use of rendered fat represented a significant leap in culinary sophistication. enabling the development of more complex flavors and the innovative blending of ingredients. Others caution against romanticizing the practice, pointing out that its origins often stemmed from sheer necessity. However, both perspectives acknowledge its central role in survival. Without rendered fat, life would have been undeniably colder, leaner, and harsher. Imagine the scene after the rendering is complete. Bowls of stew enriched with the rendered oil, bread glistening from its immersion in the fat, and dried meat softened and infused with flavor in the sizzling grease. The people eat slowly, savoring each bite, fully aware of the energy they are storing for the next day. Even the children, greasy-faced and laughing, understand that what coats their lips is not waste, but wealth. The pot is set aside, its contents cooling. Tomorrow, those cakes of fat will be carefully portioned, stored, and carried on journeys. The lingering smell will cling to everything: clothes, hair, even the air, but no one minds. To smell of grease is to smell of security, of survival. As the fire flickers and night descends, you realize that rendered fat was more than just an ingredient, it was a fundamental element. Invisible in the final dish, yet present in every bite. It transformed the meager into the hearty, the plain into the satisfying. In its shimmering surface, you catch a glimpse of the very essence of survival. Sometimes, life persists not through glamour or abundance, but through the quiet alchemy of transforming what seems like waste into sustenance. The night is thick with stars as you watch the hunters return from the plains, carrying not only meat, but also the large stomachs and intestines of a buffalo. Initially, you might recoil, unsure of their culinary purpose. But you soon witness the women carefully cleaning them, rinsing them in streams, scraping them with bone tools, and inflating them like balloons to check for leaks. Laughter rings out as children poke at the slippery surfaces. Yet the mood remains serious, for these stomachs are far from waste. Tonight, they become cooking pots. Archaeological evidence, including fragments of charred stomach linings and accounts from early explorers, confirms this practice. The stomach's natural shape is ideally suited for holding liquids. And using hot stones, soups could be prepared without a single piece of pottery. You might be surprised to learn that intestines, too, were cleaned, tied at one end, filled with broths or grains, and suspended near the fire to cook. The result resembled a primitive sausage, both portable and nourishing. Imagine the delight of biting into such food after a long day's journey, savory, filling, and neatly packaged by nature itself. Experts remain divided on whether the use of stomachs and intestines as cooking vessels was purely utilitarian or held spiritual significance. Some argue that cooking within the animal itself symbolized a profound gratitude, a way of continuing to utilize the animal's body even after death. Others maintain it was simply a practical solution in the absence of readily available clay pots. Observing the careful handling of these makeshift vessels, you suspect that both interpretations hold merit. The preparation begins with glowing stones retrieved from the fire. One by one, they are dropped into the stomach, which is already filled with water, meat, and herbs. A sharp hiss escapes, steam rising as the vessel swells. Hands move swiftly, stirring with wooden sticks, removing cooled stones, and replacing them with fresh, hot ones. Soon, the mixture bubbles, rich aromas permeating the night air. The smell is unlike anything you've encountered before, thick, meaty, earthy, with a faint hint of herbs. You can almost feel the warmth of the steam on your face, carrying the promise of nourishment and comfort. The hunters sit close, their eyes fixed on the vessel, their hunger heightened by the long days spent on the plains. A curious detail recorded by travelers is that sometimes a buffalo's stomach was placed directly onto embers. The outer lining was thick enough to withstand the heat, allowing the soup inside to simmer steadily until ready, while the outside toughened into a leathery shell. Imagine lifting such a vessel from the fire, its surface blackened, only to split it open and reveal the fragrant broth within. Children watch the process with intense fascination, understanding that this is not merely food preparation but a vital lesson in resourcefulness. They learn how to properly heat stones, prevent the vessel from bursting, and stir without tearing the delicate lining. Every detail matters, for a single mistake could mean losing a precious meal. Patience and precision are part of the legacy passed down from one generation to the next. When the stew is finally ready, bowls are filled with a ladle carved from antler. The broth is rich, almost greasy, filling the mouth with warmth. The meat falls apart effortlessly between the teeth, the herbs adding brightness, and the subtle flavor of the stomach itself lingers. Earthy and unique, but not unpleasant. It is food born from necessity, but imbued with a deep sense of gratitude. Anthropologists point out that such methods reveal a worldview where nothing of the animal was discarded. Meat provided strength, hides became clothing, bones were fashioned into tools, sinew became thread, and the stomach itself became a cooking vessel. Waste was simply not an option. To live was to utilize resources wisely, and to use them wisely was to honor the gift fully. You sit back, your belly full from this imagined stew, and reflect on how different this is from your own world of disposable packaging and single-use plastics. Here, the stomach of a buffalo is not refuse but a valuable resource. It feeds, teaches, and sustains, embodying a philosophy of respect that is too easily forgotten in modern society. As the fire burns low, the used vessel is carried away, perhaps given to the dogs or returned to the earth. Tomorrow, another hunt may bring another stomach. But tonight, the community rests in satiety. The stars shine brighter, the air grows colder, but their bellies are warm. And you realize that survival here was never about luxury, it was about creativity, patience, and a profound reverence for life itself. Snowflakes drift silently through the night, clinging to the hair and lashes of children running between the lodges. The cold air bites, but inside the shelters, you find baskets and bark containers filled with small, shriveled jewels, berries dried in the warmth of the summer sun. Blueberries, chokecherries, cranberries, and strawberries, once vibrant and juicy, are now preserved into chewy nuggets of sweetness. Leaning close to one basket, you catch their faint perfume, a ghost of summer lingering in the heart of winter. Archaeologists frequently uncover caches of dried berries in storage pits and woven containers, proving that fruit was not merely a fleeting pleasure of the warmer months, but a carefully planned reserve for leaner seasons. Native communities mastered drying techniques long before refrigeration became available, spreading berries on hides or racks to allow them to shrink under the sun and wind. Once dried, they could last for months, even a year, providing essential vitamins and sugars when fresh food was scarce. A charming detail emerges from oral histories. Children were sometimes permitted to eat berries directly from the drying racks, their lips stained purple or red, their giggles echoing through the air. The elders did not scold them, even though some fruit was lost to their snacking. It taught the young ones patience and the appreciation for the harvest. You can almost hear their laughter echoing now, mingling with the crackling of a winter fire. Scholars remain divided on whether dried berries were primarily valued as snacks, trade goods, or vital winter nutrition. Some point to their presence in ceremonial feasts, suggesting a symbolic importance, while others emphasize their role in preventing scurvy and other illnesses. The truth likely lies in the overlap, health, joy, and ritual intertwined in each handful of shriveled fruit. The process itself was deceptively simple. Fresh berries were spread thinly in the sun, turned frequently, and sometimes gently smoked over low fires to accelerate drying or deter insects. Once shriveled, they were packed into birch bark boxes or hide pouches, layered with leaves to prevent sticking. The work was meticulous and deliberate, requiring careful attention to weather and timing. Too much moisture, and the fruit spoiled. Too much heat, and it burned. You might be intrigued to learn that berries were often mixed with other foods. Crushed chokecherries, seeds and all, were blended into dried meat and fat to create pemmican, transforming a protein-heavy food into something more balanced and palatable. Rehydrated strawberries might be added to stews for a tart edge, while cranberries provided a bright, sour contrast to fatty dishes. In this way, berries served not only as sweets but also as subtle seasonings. The taste of dried fruit is vivid in your imagination. Tart cranberries that make your mouth pucker. Sweet blueberries chewy like candy. Chokecherries sharp and almost bitter. Each flavor is intensified, concentrated by the drying process. In winter, when most meals are heavy with meat and fat, a single berry can feel like a burst of sunshine on the tongue. A reminder of green fields and warm breezes. Some anthropologists argue that berry preservation was as much about cultural rhythm as nutrition. The act of gathering, drying, and storing fruit marked the passage of seasons, connecting families to cycles of abundance and scarcity. Others contend it was purely practical. But as you watch families share baskets of berries around the fire, you sense the truth. It was both ritual and necessity, celebration and survival. Elders hand-dried berries to children before bed as a treat. Hunters tuck pouches into their belts before long journeys, and women sprinkle them into morning porridge, enlivening the monotony of maize with color and flavor. Every use is simple, yet each one connects back to summer, to sunlight captured and carried into the heart of winter. A little-known practice was to soak dried berries in hot water overnight, creating a sweet infusion. Like a primitive tea, the faintly colored and fragrant liquid warmed the body and soothed the spirit. Imagine sipping it as snow howls outside, the memory of berry bushes in bloom flickering on your tongue. By the night's end, baskets are lighter, bellies are fuller, and the sweet tang of fruit lingers in the air. The fire dies down, and children curl up under furs with sticky fingers and stained lips. Outside, the snow falls thicker, blanketing the earth, yet inside, warmth spreads not just from the fire, but from the taste of summer, held safe in winter's embrace. And as you drift with them toward sleep, you realize that dried berries were more than just food, they were hope preserved. Proof that seasons change, and that summer will always return. The camp is alive with an unusual energy tonight. Fires burn brighter, logs are stacked higher, and people gather in larger numbers. You sense this is no ordinary supper, but something sacred, an occasion where food and spirit intertwine. The smell of roasting meat mingles with the sharp fragrance of herbs. And you realize you are about to witness a ceremonial feast, where cooking is inextricably linked with ritual. Archaeologists and ethnographers note that such feasts often accompanied seasonal transitions, harvest festivals, the first hunt of the year, or the return of migrating animals. It's widely understood that these meals were never merely about filling stomachs, they were about honoring cycles, expressing gratitude, and reinforcing the bonds between humans, animals, and the land. A single meal could be a prayer, a historical record, and a celebration all at once. One intriguing custom involved offering the very first bite to the fire. Meat or grain was tossed into the flames, its smoke rising skyward as a gift to unseen powers. The belief was simple yet profound: before humans ate, the spirits must be fed. Imagine the crackle of fat dripping into the fire, the hiss carrying prayers upward with each wisp of smoke. Scholars remain divided on whether ceremonial foods differed significantly from everyday fare, or whether the meaning stemmed from the context of eating rather than the specific ingredients. Some evidence suggests that rarer foods, like certain berries or the choicest cuts of meat, were reserved for ritual occasions. Others argue that it was the act of gathering, singing, and blessing that transformed ordinary stews into sacred fare. Watching the preparations, you sense it was a combination of both, the food itself and the intentions behind its preparation and consumption. The preparations are elaborate. A massive pit has been dug, lined with hot stones and filled with bundles of venison, maize, and squash wrapped in leaves. Clay pots simmer with soups thickened by beans and flavored with wild herbs. Women stir slowly, humming rhythmic songs that blend with the crackling of the fire. Men chant low prayers, calling upon ancestors and animal spirits. Children dart around wide-eyed, their laughter softened by the solemnity of the occasion. You might be fascinated to learn that certain tribes painted their faces or decorated cooking vessels with symbols before feasting, spirals for the cycles of the seasons, animal figures for strength, handprints for connection. These markings disappeared with the flames, but their meaning lingered, woven into the very atmosphere of the night. The smell is overwhelming: smoke, meat, sweet squash, herbs, rising thick and heavy, blanketing the camp. Hunger intensifies, but no one eats yet. The food is circled, blessed, and sometimes danced around, each step reinforcing that eating is a communal act, not a solitary indulgence. The feast belongs to everyone, even those who cannot attend, ancestors, spirits, the unborn. When the pit is finally opened, steam bursts forth like breath from the earth itself. The bundles are lifted out, their leaves charred but fragrant, the meat inside falling apart with tenderness. The pots are ladled into bowls, portions distributed carefully. Only when the elders signal do people begin to eat. And when they do, silence falls first, a silence of respect, of gratitude. The first bites are chewed slowly, deliberately, as though tasting more than just food. A lesser-known detail is that some of these ceremonies involved storytelling woven directly into the meal. Elders recounted myths of how corn was given, how the animals sacrificed themselves, how the world was shaped by hunger and generosity. The words were seasoning as vital as salt or herbs, infusing every mouthful with memory. Imagine listening to a creation story while chewing on roasted maize, the tale and the taste blending into one singular experience. Debates among anthropologists continue about whether such rituals were primarily religious or primarily social. Some see them as spiritual obligations, others as strategies for reinforcing social bonds and distributing resources fairly. To you, sitting cross-legged with a bowl of steaming stew, the distinction hardly matters. You feel both the sacred weight of the moment and the joy of sharing food with everyone around you. The meal stretches long into the night. Drums join the crackling of the fire. Feet stamp in rhythm, and songs rise under the stars. Children doze against their parents' shoulders, mouths still stained with berries or grease. The fire burns lower, embers glowing red, yet the voices remain strong, weaving stories into the darkness. By the end, bones and husks are gathered and burned or carefully buried to honor the animals and plants that gave themselves. Nothing is discarded carelessly. Even scraps return to the cycle, feeding the earth and fire. You lean back, your belly full and your ears ringing with song. The taste of stew lingers on your tongue. But more than that, the memory of the night fills you. A ceremonial feast has nourished you in more ways than one: body, spirit, and community bound together in the glow of firelight. And as you close your eyes, you understand that for these people, cooking was never merely about survival. It was a dialogue with the sacred. A way of saying, we are here, we remember, we are grateful. The days grow longer, and with them come travelers bearing goods from distant lands. You notice the excitement ripple through the camp as baskets and pouches are opened, revealing treasures not found in their own territory: bright red peppers, coarse chunks of salt, even strange seeds with unfamiliar scents. Trade has arrived, and with it, the flavor of distant places. Historians widely agree that native trade networks stretched astonishing distances, linking coastal tribes with inland farmers, northern hunters with southern growers. Archaeological finds, shells in desert sites, obsidian in prairies, and salt far from the sea, confirm that these webs of exchange carried more than tools and ornaments. They carried tastes. And taste, you realize, has always been a form of wealth. One curious detail is how peppers, once introduced, rapidly became integrated into stews and broths. Their fiery kick transformed familiar meals, adding warmth not just against winter's chill, but also a thrilling sensation on the tongue. You can almost feel it now, a slow burn creeping across your lips, turning plain maize mush into something electrifying. Some researchers suggest that the introduction of trade spices altered not only diet but also identity. To cook with peppers or salt was to participate in a larger world, to taste the distant lands from which they originated. Others argue that these new ingredients were simply incorporated quietly into existing traditions. Valued but not transformative, the debate continues. Yet in the rising steam of the stew pot before you, you smell both continuity and change. The scene is vivid: clay pots bubbling with maize and beans, now brightened with pinches of salt, venison roasts on skewers, rubbed with wild herbs but also dusted with ground peppers. Children's eyes widen at the fiery taste, some laughing, others reaching for water, learning firsthand that flavor can sting as well as soothe. Elders nod approvingly, recognizing that these foreign touches add depth to familiar meals. A lesser-known practice was to preserve salt in damp cakes, mixing it with ash or clay for safe transport without crumbling. When needed, the cakes were scraped, and the granules sprinkled into stews. Imagine the relief of tasting salted broth after months of plain fare. It must have felt almost decadent. A reminder of wealth and connection. The trade goods were not constant. Sometimes years passed without peppers. Sometimes salt ran out. Sometimes new seeds arrived. Each ingredient carried with it a story of who had traveled, who had traded, what alliances had been forged. To taste a pepper was to taste diplomacy. To chew on salt was to chew on kinship between far-flung peoples. Anthropologists still debate whether culinary changes from trade weakened local traditions or enriched them. Some caution that reliance on external goods may have created vulnerabilities. Others celebrate the creativity sparked by new flavors. Sitting here, spoon in hand, you see no conflict, only a stew that is richer, sharper, more layered than before, a living testament that culture is not static but porous. Always willing to embrace what makes life better. Imagine now the first sip of pepper-spiced broth. The heat hits your tongue, warming your chest even before the fire does. Salt sharpens the sweetness of the squash, balancing the richness of the venison. The taste is unfamiliar yet comforting, foreign yet already integrated into the rhythm of the meal. You wipe your lips with the back of your hand and smile at the paradox. Newness that feels old. Difference that feels like home. Trade spices also carried prestige. To serve them at a feast was to demonstrate connection, influence, even power. They signaled that your community's ties reached far and wide, that you were part of a network larger than the horizon. Every pinch of salt or pepper in the pot was not only flavor, but proof of belonging. When the pots are emptied and the guests depart, you sit quietly, the aftertaste still lingering. The peppers sting your tongue. The salt lingers on your lips. And you realize you have eaten not just food, but geography, politics, and history all at once. A meal here is never just a meal. As the fire burns low, the traders pack their goods again, moving on to the next village. The people here wave, their bellies warm, their tongues alive with spice. And you understand that in this world without markets or supermarkets, food still traveled, still connected lives. The kitchen was not bounded by the forest or the river. It stretched across the continent. Carried in pouches, shared in stories, dissolved in stew. And in that realization, you taste the truth. Every spice, every grain of salt is more than flavor. It is a thread in the web of human connection. Binding camps to camps, rivers to mountains, strangers to kin. The sun sinks behind the hills, casting long shadows over the camp. And tonight you notice smoke rising not from one fire, but from many. Families are scattered across the clearing, each tending their own smaller flames. Some are roasting meat on skewers, others boiling maize porridge in clay pots, still others baking bread under mounds of ash. It strikes you that while great feasts and ceremonial pits draw attention, most cooking happened in these small, daily fires, intimate spaces where families shared ordinary meals. Archaeologists examining hearth remains in ancient dwellings often find clusters of small fire pits. Not just one large communal blaze. It's widely recognized that each family maintained its own cooking rhythm, its own pot simmering, its own share of fuel gathered. These modest hearths were the true kitchens of daily life, sustaining the slow rhythm of survival far more than the rare grandeur of feasts. One delightful detail is how these family hearths served a dual purpose. They were cooking spaces and storytelling centers. Parents didn't just teach children how to stoke fires or stir porridge. They also shared creation myths, tales of how the stars ignited, how animals once conversed, and how maize first sprouted from the earth. Picture a scene. A family huddled around a fire. The comforting aroma of a simmering stew mingling with the captivating narrative of their origins. The warmth of the food mirrored the warmth of the stories shared. Scholars continue to debate the degree of privacy surrounding these hearth-centered meals. Some historical evidence suggests families frequently invited neighbors to share their culinary creations, blurring the lines between personal and communal possessions. This interpretation highlights the prevalence of cooperation within the community. However, Other scholars maintain that while cooperation was undoubtedly common, daily meals primarily served to reinforce strong family identities and bonds. Observing the laughter and conversations drifting between nearby fires, one suspects the truth lies somewhere in between, each hearth unique, yet all flames contributing to a larger, interwoven community. The food itself was simple yet deeply satisfying. A clay pot gently simmered with maize gruel, its surface bubbling softly as strips of smoked fish warmed over the embers. The aroma was subtle, a captivating blend of earthy, briny notes, subtly enhanced by the faint sweetness of dried berries sprinkled into the porridge. Children dipped their carved wooden spoons into the steaming mixture, blowing gently before taking eager bites, their faces flushed with warmth, their lips stained a vibrant purple from the berries. An interesting detail passed down through oral tradition reveals that some families kept small pets, dogs, even raccoons, that nestled near the fire and were occasionally given scraps of food. These animals became integrated into the rhythm of mealtimes, their presence tolerated and often cherished. Imagine the gentle sound of a dog gnawing on a bone beside you. A member of the family. A part of the kitchen itself. The fires themselves burned differently, depending on the type of wood used. Some families favored cedar, appreciating its sharp, cleansing smoke. Others preferred cottonwood, which burned with a steady, mild flame. Each choice subtly altered the taste of the food, imparting a unique signature to each family's cooking. Unintentionally, these families mastered the art of flavor simply by mastering their woodpiles. Historians continue to debate whether these family hearths fostered social distinctions. Did wealthier families hoard more food, or were resources consistently shared equitably? Some evidence points towards variations in storage capacity. However, oral traditions emphasized generosity as a fundamental virtue. Watching bowls passed effortlessly between fires, it appears that even when inequalities existed, hospitality served to soften their sharp edges. As you partake in this imagined meal, you notice the intimacy of the moment. There's no grand feast, no elaborate ceremony, no spectacle. Just a family clustered around a fire, bowls in hand, steam rising into the night. Yet, the scene holds a profound sense of meaning. Survival isn't solely about extraordinary events, it's also about the quiet assurance of repetition. The comforting knowledge that tomorrow, another fire will be lit, another pot will simmer. The voices around you soften as the meal draws to a close. Children yawn, mothers scrape their bowls clean, and fathers gently poke the embers to keep the fire alive through the night. Small sparks leap skyward, joining the stars, while the lingering scent of wood smoke clings to hair and clothing. The day ends not with drama, but with the comforting embrace of warmth. And in that quiet moment, a critical realization dawns. While history books celebrate battles, ceremonies, and grand councils, daily life was sustained by these small fires, these simple meals, these humble acts of cooking. Understanding how Native Americans cooked without modern kitchens offers insight not only into their tools and techniques, but also into the rhythm of their lives, a rhythm that was steady, patient, and deeply rooted in family and flame. As the last bowls are set aside and children drift off to sleep, the hearths glow quietly, keeping watch. Drowsy from the stew and smoke, you find yourself lulled by the same quiet rhythm, the heartbeat of countless small fires that carried generations safely through the night. The morning air is crisp and carries the earthy scent of damp soil. You hear the shuffling of feet as people head towards the fields. Today's work isn't hunting or gathering, it's farming. Long rows of maize stand tall, their stalks rustling softly, while squash vines sprawl low to the ground, and bean plants climb upward. Together, they form the ancient agricultural trio known as the Three Sisters. You've seen them on the table in stews, but now you witness their vibrant life in the field, where the process of cooking begins long before the fire is even lit. Archaeological evidence from across the Americas confirms the sophistication of these planting systems. The intercropping of corn, beans, and squash wasn't a haphazard practice, but a carefully engineered system. The corn stalks provided a natural trellis for the beans to climb. The beans, in turn, restored nitrogen to the soil, while the broad leaves of the squash shaded out weeds. This wasn't primitive trial and error, but a carefully orchestrated ecological symphony that ensured reliable harvests season after season. Interestingly, some communities incorporated a fourth sister into their planting: sunflowers. Their tall stalks diverted birds away from the corn, while their seeds provided valuable oil and protein. Imagine the bright yellow heads swaying over the green fields, a splash of color that was both beautiful and practical. Researchers continue to debate whether the Three Sisters system originated from a single point and spread outward or developed independently in different regions. Some argue it radiated from central Mexico, while others believe local adaptations emerged simultaneously across various landscapes. The debate continues, but standing here in the morning mist, you see less a question of origin and more a testament to human ingenuity. The harvest itself is a communal effort. Families work together, pulling ripe squash from the soil, snapping ears of corn, and plucking beans from climbing vines. The air fills with chatter and laughter, the rhythm of voices as steady as the rustling of leaves. Children chase each other between rows, occasionally pressed into service to carry baskets that seem too large for their small arms. Every hand matters, every kernel counts. The crops are carried back to camp in woven baskets, their colors vibrant: golden corn, green beans, orange squash. The sheer abundance is striking. A rainbow of nourishment laid at the feet of the people. You catch the sweet, grassy smell of fresh corn silk, the earthy weight of the squash, the crisp snap of beans breaking in half. These scents and textures are the very beginning of countless meals. As a fascinating aside, freshly harvested corn was sometimes roasted directly in its husk over open flames, the leaves blackening while the kernels steamed inside. Children peeled back the leaves, their fingers burnt but delighted, biting into sweet, smoky corn that required no additional seasoning. You can almost taste the crunch, hear the laughter echoing across the field. The beans and squash, too, had their immediate uses. Tender beans were boiled into soups, while squash was sliced thinly and roasted until golden. However, a significant portion of the harvest was destined for storage. Corn was dried on racks, beans strung on cords, and squash sliced into rings and hung to dry, hardening in the sun. These preserved foods formed the backbone of winter survival, proving that farming was as much about tomorrow as it was about today. Anthropologists observe that the act of farming reshaped social rhythms. Hunting required mobility, but fields anchored communities, creating permanent or semi-permanent villages. Cooking practices evolved accordingly. Instead of relying solely on the day's hunt, people could plan meals around harvest cycles, building dietary consistency. Yet scholars still debate whether agriculture improved life or introduced new hardships: less mobility, more labor, a greater risk of famine if the crops failed. Both perspectives hold merit, and the steaming pots of maize gruel back at camp serve as a reminder of the delicate balance between plenty and scarcity. Tonight, the freshly gathered crops are cooked in a large clay pot. Corn kernels burst in the heat, beans soften, and squash melts into a creamy sweetness. The broth thickens into a fragrant stew, rich with herbs. It's hearty, filling, and deeply comforting. The first spoonful fills your mouth with a symphony of sweetness, earthiness, and smoke, flavors bound together as naturally as the plants themselves grew. You realize that the Three Sisters are not just crops, they are harmony served in a bowl. The field, the harvest, and the cooking merge into a single, continuous cycle. Each bite of stew embodies the sun, the rain, the soil, and the hands that nurtured them. Eating becomes an act of remembrance, of honoring the wisdom that designed such a balanced system. As night falls, baskets of corn husks and squash rinds are gathered, some fed to animals, others burned and returned to the soil. Nothing is wasted. The fields rest quietly beyond the firelight, waiting for another season, and you, warmed by the stew and soothed by the rhythm of the harvest, understand that farming was more than work, it was the heartbeat of the community. The steady pulse that made cooking without modern kitchens not just possible, but plentiful. The sky is gray with the promise of rain, and families hurry to their storehouses to check on the bounty preserved from earlier months. You follow them to structures made of bark, woven reeds, and carefully layered earth. Some are raised on stilts to keep out rodents. Others dug deep into the soil and covered with logs and sod. These are not houses for people, but homes for food, granaries, caches, and pits that hold the lifeblood of the community. Without these hidden pantries, all the cooking you've witnessed would have been fleeting, lost to the passing seasons. Archaeological digs frequently uncover these storage pits, lined with bark, clay, or woven mats. The remains of charred maize kernels, squash seeds, and bean pods testify that these places were filled with provisions intended to sustain families through the harshest months. It's widely acknowledged that mastering storage was just as crucial as mastering hunting or farming. What good was a bountiful harvest if it spoiled before winter's end? One fascinating detail is how some storage pits were sealed with layers of ash. The ash deterred insects and rodents while absorbing excess moisture. This practice demonstrates a type of science born of observation and a deep understanding of how elements interact. Refined and passed down through generations. Imagine scooping away the ash in January, uncovering the maize beneath, still dry and edible, a hidden treasure preserved by foresight. Scholars continue to debate whether these storage systems represented shared communal wealth or private family reserves. Some pits were large enough to feed dozens, suggesting collective ownership, while others were smaller, perhaps maintained by individual households. The debate persists, but what you see here is evidence that both models could coexist. Balancing individuality with cooperation. The storage houses are opened with care. Inside, baskets overflow with dried beans. Strings of squash slices hang like necklaces, and gourds full of seeds clink softly when moved. The smell is faintly sweet and earthy, mixed with the musk of aged bark. To you, it feels like stepping into a bank. But the currency here is calories, measured not in coins, but in kernels. A quirky detail from oral traditions is that children were sometimes told stories of mischievous spirits that dwelled in the caches, stealing food if proper rituals weren't observed. These tales, part warning, part entertainment, instilled respect for storage and discipline in the use of food. You can almost hear a grandmother whispering the tale beside the fire. Children's eyes wide as they promise not to sneak extra handfuls of maize from these stores. Tonight's meal is selected: dried beans, kernels of maize, and a gourd of seeds. The beans are soaked, the maize cracked, and the seeds toasted over a small fire. Soon, a stew begins to form. Rich and hearty despite its humble origins. It tastes of patience, of foresight, of the invisible labor performed months ago. Each spoonful is a reward for discipline and preparation. Anthropologists note that storage not only secured food but also shaped power dynamics. Those who managed larger caches could feed others, gaining influence and prestige. Some even argue that storage laid the foundation for more complex social hierarchies. Others counter that generosity was the true currency, that those who shared most were those most respected. Watching bowls passed freely from one family to another, you sense truth in both perspectives. Food could both divide and unite, depending on how it was handled. You take your imagined bowl and taste the beans, soft yet chewy. The maize hearty, the toasted seeds nutty. It's not fancy fare, but it steadies you, fills you, warms you. You realize this is food designed not for indulgence but for survival, measured, portioned, carefully stewarded across the lean months. By the fire, families discuss what remains in storage, calculating how many weeks are left before the next harvest. It's a quiet form of accounting, no ledgers or numbers, just memory and experience guiding their decisions. Every kernel eaten is weighed against tomorrow's needs. And yet, despite the caution, laughter still bubbles, stories are still told, and food is still shared. Survival doesn't erase joy, it deepens it. As night falls, the storage houses are sealed again, lids pressed down, clay smeared, ash scattered. The people return to their homes, bowls licked clean, bellies full. The caches sit silently in the dark, unseen but essential guardians of tomorrow's meals. And you realize something profound. Native kitchens extended far beyond the fire or pot. They stretched into the fields, the forests, and beneath the ground. They were invisible, yet everywhere, rooted in the principle that survival required not just ingenuity in cooking, but discipline in saving. The rain finally falls, tapping against roofs and soaking the earth. But inside, families sleep soundly, knowing that beneath the soil, baskets of maize and beans wait patiently. The fire may flicker, the wind may howl, but the pantry of the earth stands firm. The rain has cleared, leaving the air fresh and cool. You hear the rustle of reeds near the riverbank. A group of women wade into the shallows, carrying woven baskets on their backs. They bend low, tugging at the muddy water, pulling free long, starchy roots, cattails, arrowheads, water lilies. Their laughter mixes with the splash of water. And you realize you're about to see how wetlands became kitchens. Archaeological digs in river valleys and lakeshores often reveal charred tubers and seeds. Proof that aquatic plants were staples of native diets. It's widely acknowledged that these wetlands served as gardens without fences, their bounty renewing each season without the need for plowing or planting. Cattail roots, for instance, could be roasted or ground into flour, while their pollen was collected as a golden dust to enrich breads and porridges. A curious, lesser-known detail is that cattail shoots were sometimes eaten fresh, peeled like celery, their flavor crisp and mild. Children nibbled them raw in springtime, a treat that signaled the turning of the seasons. You can almost hear the crunch now, watery and refreshing. A small joy pulled straight from the marsh. Scholars still debate whether wetland plants were central to diets or supplements to farming and hunting. Some evidence points to their abundance serving as a life-saving fallback during lean times. Others argue they were delicacies enjoyed for variety rather than necessity. The truth likely shifted with the season and circumstance. In famine, they were lifelines; in plenty, they were flavor and texture. The roots gathered today are rinsed in the river, their muddy skins peeled away. Some are sliced and dropped into a clay pot to boil with beans. Others are roasted in ash, their insides turning soft and sweet. A few are pounded into a paste to be dried for later, their starch saved for future meals. The versatility is striking. You see not just food, but flour, thickener, vegetable, and snack all in one plant. The smell rising from the fire is earthy, slightly nutty, unlike meat or grain, but equally filling. When you taste it in your imagination, the flavor is subtle, mild, but grounding, like eating the essence of the soil itself. Mixed with beans and maize, it creates a dish that is hearty yet balanced, carrying the nourishment of land and water together. A quirky tidbit: cattail fluff, usually used for bedding or insulation, was occasionally sprinkled onto sticky dough to keep it from adhering to hands and stones. Imagine biting into bread dusted with soft down, the fluff disappearing on your tongue like a strange, feathery seasoning. It seems almost whimsical, yet practical too. The wetlands provide more than roots. Seeds of wild rice, pads of water lilies, even frogs and turtles supplement the basket. All are carried back to camp, reminders that rivers and marshes quenched not only thirst but also hunger. In some villages, elders said that the water itself was a grandmother, endlessly giving, endlessly forgiving. Eating from it was an act of respect as much as survival. Anthropologists continue to discuss whether reliance on wetlands signaled adaptability or desperation. Was it a deliberate culinary choice? Or was it simply necessity in times of scarcity? Standing here, chewing roasted cattail, you suspect it was both. Choice and need often walk hand in hand, blurring the lines in the story of human endurance. As night settles, bowls of marsh root stew are passed around. Children wrinkle their noses at first, then chew happily once the warmth spreads through them. Elders nod, remembering seasons when cattails alone filled bellies. The meal is simple, humble, but rich with memory. You lean back by the fire, the marsh smell still in your nose, the taste of roots lingering faintly, and you realize that kitchens here weren't bounded by stone walls or thatched roofs. They extended into the mud, the water, the reeds. They required no ovens or markets, only hands, baskets, patience, and the wisdom to see food where others might see weeds. As the fire dies down, the river hums softly, frogs croak in chorus, and the baskets sit empty, waiting for tomorrow's harvest. And you, Warm from the stew. Understand that even the most overlooked plants carried the power to sustain life. Proving once again that survival was a matter of attention as much as effort. The sky tonight is wide and full of stars. The fire snapping low as if reluctant to die. You sit among the people one last time, watching as they prepare a final meal that feels less about hunger and more about memory. From baskets come handfuls of dried beans, strings of squash, pouches of berries, cakes of fat, even strips of meat saved from earlier hunts. Every ingredient gathered over seasons. Every method you've seen, roasting, drying, grinding, boiling, now converges into one great pot. It is as though the entire story of their cooking is being retold in the language of food. Archaeologists sometimes describe combination stews found in charred pot residues, mixtures of grains, vegetables, and proteins that defy single classification. It's widely accepted that such stews were common, a practical way to use what was available and avoid waste. But here, in this moment, you sense it's more than practical, it's symbolic. A reminder that survival was never the work of one method alone, but of many, woven together like threads in a basket. A quirky yet beautiful practice emerges before the stew is served. A portion is set aside for those who have passed on. A bowl is placed near the fire, steam rising into the night. The gesture isn't morbid, but tender, a recognition that ancestors, too, deserve to share in the nourishment. You watch the steam rise, curling upward toward the stars, and imagine unseen guests partaking quietly. Historians still discuss whether such rituals of offering were universal or varied greatly by region. Some argue that every meal contained a spiritual dimension, while others believe ritual was reserved for special occasions. The evidence is mixed, but here you sense a truth that scholarship can only circle. Food always carried meaning, whether spoken aloud or silently felt. The stew bubbles slowly, a rich, thick mixture of all things familiar. The smell is overwhelming: smoky meat, nutty maize, earthy beans, sweet squash, tart berries, even the faint caramel note of rendered fat. It's not refined cuisine, it's life condensed into a bowl. You imagine lifting a spoonful to your lips, the flavors colliding and blending at once. Every bite tells a story of river, forest, field, and fire. The community settles into quiet. There's no laughter now, no shouting, only the gentle sound of spoons tapping bowls and the crackling fire. You look at their faces and see something deeper than contentment: resilience. Each person here has eaten through seasons of plenty and hunger, through storms and droughts, through lean winters and abundant harvests. Every meal is testimony to their endurance. An overlooked but remarkable detail is how leftovers are treated. Nothing is thrown away. What cannot be eaten tonight is dried again, stored, or shared with animals. Even ashes from the fire are scattered on fields to enrich the soil. Waste is absent because, in a world without modern abundance, everything holds value. You sense the humility in this, the understanding that food isn't endless but borrowed. The debate among anthropologists about how much of this cooking was innovation versus necessity seems almost irrelevant as you sit here. Innovation and necessity aren't rivals, they are companions. Every trick of preservation, every clever use of bone or bark, every ritual offering grew from the same root: the desire to live well with what the land provided. The fire burns low, the last bowls are emptied, and the people begin to drift toward their shelters. Children curl against their mothers, bellies full, eyes heavy. Elders sit a little longer, gazing at the flames as if reading the future in the embers. You stay among them, warmed by stew and smoke, listening to the steady breath of a people who survived not through kitchens of steel and glass, but through patience, creativity, and respect. And in that quiet, you realize you've been given more than recipes or methods. You've been shown a worldview where cooking isn't separate from hunting or gathering, from ritual or story, from survival or joy. It's all one, woven together like the three sisters in a single field, like fire and smoke bound together in a single flame. The last ember snaps, and night deepens. You lean back, full not of food but of understanding. The native way of cooking without modern kitchens was never primitive, it was sophisticated, balanced, sustainable, and profoundly human. Now, as the final pot is emptied and the camp settles into silence. Let the story soften. The fire shrinks to glowing coals, and the air cools against your cheeks. You picture the people lying down beneath hides and furs, their stomachs full, their spirits eased. Outside, the fields sleep, the rivers murmur, the forests breathe quietly. Nothing more is asked tonight, nothing more is needed. Let your own breathing slow as theirs does. Imagine the rhythm of their lives, the grind of maize, the crack of firewood, the bubbling of stew, slipping into the background, fading into memory. You can almost hear the steady heartbeat of the earth beneath you. Calm and reassuring. Every sound of cooking, every scent of food, every taste of survival now blends into a single hum of continuity. There is comfort in knowing that these practices endured for centuries, carried by countless hands, passed down through generations. And though the tools may seem different from your world, stone, bone, bark, clay, the intentions are familiar: to feed, to care, to preserve, to share. These aren't ancient impulses, they are timeless. Let your mind grow light, drifting like steam rising from a cooling pot. Let your body sink as though wrapped in warm furs by a fading fire. The people you've imagined fade gently into the night, their laughter and voices soft as wind in the trees. Only calm remains, and with it, rest. Close your eyes, let the embers dim, and carry with you the warmth of their kitchens, earth, fire, patience, and love. They are safe, sound, and ready for bed. Sleep tight. We're all safe and secure, comfortably full, and ready to drift off to sleep. Sweet dreams, everyone.